right, we are live. Welcome, everybody. We have a fun one tonight. We got William Philippek. We have Kenny from Island Morels. We have David Levinson. And then first things first, let's get down to U.S. Ark. U.S. Ark fighting for your right, my right, to own the reptiles that we love. They do a really good job mitigating all the poor legislation that's being imposed to harm the community. So please support U.S. Ark. And then we have the Reptile Super Show. I think it's January 10th. I'm going to be there. Everybody should come out. January, let's see, Reptile Super Show dates. January 10th and 11th. All right, so come out and see that. It's going to be an awesome show. It's definitely a must-see expo. Always a ton of people there. Really good place to network. Going to add Dave. Dave looks like I guess he's got a turkey there. He's dressed up as a fucking turkey. Happy Thanksgiving. William.
How's it going, fellas?
And then Kenny.
How are you guys doing?
From Island Morelia. All right. So first things first, Kenny, why don't you introduce yourself? This is the first time you've been on our channel. You work with a lot of green trees. What other species you work with? Are green trees your primary focus?
Yeah, so green tree pythons are my primary focus. I have some Antaresia, a few tree monitors, but that's not really a project. Some miscellaneous carpets here and there, a few other pythons, but everything for the majority is green tree pythons.
Okay. Anyway, am I pronouncing the genus name right? Morelia?
Yeah. Okay. No, you're good. Perfect.
All right. And I'll say it enough, so I don't know what I'm saying sometimes.
No, you're good. I've messed up a few of the genus names. When I've talked about pine snakes, I was mispronouncing it for a while.
Yeah, that's even like rat snakes, like Pantherophytes. Some people are like, I thought it was Pantherophis. I'm like, actually, I would have thought the same. I Google searched it though and found out that it's Pantherophytes. That's the only reason I know.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
we've been saying it wrong too now.
Then bull snakes and that genus Pituophis. That one, if anybody ever needs to pronounce the bull snake genus name and you forget, just ask Craig Trumbauer to say it, and then you'll know how to say it. So one topic we were going to talk about was green tree pythons, them in captivity, because it's definitely a difficult species. It's definitely a very sought after species. It's kind of one of those grail species that a lot of people, would love to have one day. They're amazing looking. They're really cool to look at. They're very cryptic, very pretty. And so Dave and I were talking, and, obviously MJ's a big green tree python guy. Actually, we should have asked MJ. Should be, hey, it'd be a very easy guest to have on. You want to not have Friday off? Come talk with us. We'll have to do that later. But anyway, setting them up with like UV, there's different setups. How do you have your setup? And let's just go from there. How do you have your setup?
Yeah, so pretty much all my adults for the most part are in PVC cages. If I have any lighting in there, it's just LEDs. For some of the plants I usually have pothos for the most part in there. I don't provide UVB. Even with the younger animals, then I just work down in tub sizes up until they're adults for pretty much all my animals.
Okay. Well, to be fair, I think even the people that say, hey, I like to use UV on any of my like my species, like let's say, just gonna say green trees because that's what we're talking about. They're definitely not using that on babies, that's for sure.
Yeah.
With the little setups and everything, and them being a little more fragile, and UV you also have to be careful with. You can't have the light too close. There's a lot of talk with that, even in cooler, but it's like, I keep plains hognose snakes. I do not have UV on mine. There's definitely discussions, even in the cooler bird community, of like the benefits or potential benefits. And it's a very funny thing because it's like, each species of snake also has different structured scales. While green trees, they don't have keeled scales, and their scales kind of remind me more of like a Brazilian rainbow boa. They're a little thinner, a little softer. While like a hognose snake scales, a plain hognose snake scales, is more like a rattlesnake's. They're heavily keeled, they're thicker and denser, and they offer a layer of protection. So some of these scales, are going to absorb more, D3 than others, and some are actually going to kind of deflect it. And actually, it's hard to find this information sometimes. But one person I seen this person arguing UV, and there's this one person there that seemed to know a bit. And I thought what he was saying was interesting because he's like, well, one study showed this one species of snakes didn't really garner that much D3, that their scales mostly protected against it. And so you use LED light on your green trees. And I'm assuming you have pretty good success. What is your breeding results like typically with your green trees? And how big of a collection of green trees do you have?
Yeah, so I switched over to the LEDs after I used to run fluorescence and I tried UV at some point, probably almost 10 years back. But the problem was I ran into the issue of they would start to generate too much heat as you'd go up in the stacks, and I didn't really notice any significant benefits, so I moved away from them over time. Regarding breeding, I've been having probably the best success I've had since probably the past 2 seasons. Uh, After I went back with Vin and switched to feeding cycles and stopped doing just more of a consistent feeding pattern, I started really seeing the results of that. It took about 2 seasons to get all of my adults into the swing of things and accustomed to that seasonality. Um, I had a good amount of holdbacks, and I lost those over the summer in the fire. But luckily, I had all of my adults at my house, so I still have all the stuff I needed to make ingredients. But just gotta redo all of that. I'm probably working with. I'm only in the double digits still in regards to chondros. I'll definitely be hoarding most of my stuff and working up the numbers over the next 2 seasons, I'd say. But if I had to give like a percentage of how much success rate I have with females, I'd say it's 8 out of 10 will breed for me every season. I have a few girls that will be doing their 4th season in a row this year. So, and I pretty much do maternal with all my animals unless I don't have the option. So if that female gets off the clutch or scatters them, I'll take them and artificially incubate, but otherwise I do maternal.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So you'll let the female maternally incubate them, wrap the eggs through the whole process. Do they lay their eggs, like, do you have them up in like a canopy, like hide nesting area, or do they nest down at the bottom of the enclosure, or does it differ between females?
So I set up all my females with just bird nest boxes, and I put sphagnum moss inside of it. I put it in the back of the enclosure away from the heat element, just so it doesn't really interfere with them too much, and it's at more of a steady temperature. I'd say most of my females use them. I have one or two that love to lay on the opposite side of the enclosure on a wee pad and then scatter them. But for the most part, I'd say like 80% of the females use the nest boxes.
Okay. And you said 8 out of 10 females end up going. Are those females laying good eggs?
I've had a few females, if I was including that, and I'd say one. So 7 out of 10, I would say lay good eggs.
That seems pretty good to me because I know
last year. Yeah, last year I had the largest success rate I've had prior because I was raising up some girls and also just establishing some imports I had. I made the mistake of messing with my nest boxes for the first time and trying something new. Definitely backfired, so I switched back to just using the bird nest boxes that are just enclosed, opening top, hole right in the front, nothing else inside other than the moss. I tried using a hole on the bottom, but I had too much ventilation in those enclosures, so it started suctioning a lot of the moisture out from the bottom.
Okay.
So
are you keeping a gauge or anything in there to keep an eye on your humidity?
No, I just keep the wee wee pads moist the entire time. So for the all my chondros, I always make sure they're over 75% humidity. They're usually sitting at around 90%.
Okay. And who's like your, is there a green tree python mentor that you had?
So I've learned, I've had Vin as my mentor since I was like 16 years old. Um, Prior to that, growing up, I would always look up to Rico Walder, go on his website, always check out all his stuff. And that's kind of where I started getting that obsession when I was probably like around 10 years old.
Okay. And so green tree pythons, I take it, that's your favorite species of reptile.
Yeah, 100%.
Very cool.
There's a number of stuff I'd love to work with in the future. It's just at the moment I really want to focus in on the green trees and hone in on that and get that settled before I start any new projects and take on anything like that.
Yeah. Do you like hognose?
I'm not a big colubrid guy. I'm not gonna
really?
lie. I like some of the Asian rat snake species, but a lot of our native species, I'm not the biggest fan of. I do enjoy pine snakes, but other than that, that's probably the only colubrid native to U.S. that I really plan on working with in the future.
Okay.
Give them time, Junior. That seems to be an old man's thing. When they get older, then they start appreciating the native stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like the hognose. We always had them around, but they never grew on me to the extent where I was like, all right, I gotta grab a colony of them. I can appreciate them, maybe have one or two of them, but I don't.
Were you working with Vin when he had a decent collection of hognoses? I remember him and Jeff Newmanis worked together with the hognoses for a while.
By the time I was with him, he pretty much had phased out the hognose. There was maybe a few floating around, but not like the project he was working with at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, like 23 years ago, he had some pretty nice red phase. And then he had, later on, he had Xanthics and stuff. And yeah, he's one of the, first people to have snow projects. I know he worked with a partner for a while, but yeah, I know he definitely phased out. How old are you, Kenny?
26.
Okay, yeah, I can tell you're a little younger. So yeah, I'm 38. So yeah, because I remember when Vin used to have, hognose at the Daytona show and stuff. And so you said you started working with him when you were like 16. So that's like a decade ago.
Yeah, about 2015.
Yeah, and he got out of hognose. That sounds about right.
He had a few floating around, but not any large numbers by that point.
Yeah. Okay.
They definitely they didn't enjoy some of the warmer climate we were getting here, so I know wasn't as conducive to have.
Yeah, you said you didn't really like hognose. Now everything's silent.
Yeah, you killed the mood, Jeff. He jumped right into hognose. So what? Okay, so what's your favorite species within the green python group? Which group do you like the most? And then what locality within that species do you like the most?
So out of the green tree pythons, I like the polker the most. Polcher,
Right.
the northerns. No, correction.
Northwestern.
So, yeah. So I enjoy them the most. My primary focus is pretty much artifacts are my biggest thing that I focus on at the moment. That's my favorite locality of them. I would definitely say Udarensis are a close second, though.
Yeah,
I do enjoy them.
What are those green trees that are supposed to be pretty hypermelanistic? Like they're almost black sometimes.
Beox tends to be the darker one, it seems like, yeah.
I don't really tend to hear about those. I thought Beox, though, were a pretty, fairly common locale.
Yeah, well, they seem like it's an older thing because I've seen Patrick Holmes had a couple adults look like older animals that are real dark green. No, I wouldn't say black, but I mean really dark green.
Yeah, I get you. Okay, like that dark jungle green.
Yeah, but not black like some of the designer stuff I've seen.
Yeah, a lot of that dark stuff with the Beox you'll get from the red Neos, but for a while everyone was doing outcross projects and trying to make all this wacky stuff. So no one really line bred Beox or focused on trying to make just a melanistic Beox project. It's only been in probably the last 5 years or so that people are really trying to do more locality projects.
Now, with
So
the green tree ontogenic color shift from neonate to adult, is there any specifics you look for as a baby? Because I know the reds, like I like the red babies more. Is there anything you expect more from a red neonate developing into an adult versus a yellow neonate?
yeah, so with the red neonates, you can get a lot more of that blue and melanistic appearance. With the yellow neonates, you're not really going to see that, especially
Okay.
with locality stuff.
Okay, that kind of makes sense because the reds predominantly are already darker pigmented to begin with, while the yellows are a lot brighter, cleaner neonates.
Yeah, so you won't get more of that designer appearance out of the yellow neonates unless you're doing like a high yellow project or something. But at the for the most part, right now everyone's into the very high blue and melanistic stuff. So the red neonates have become super popular.
Gotcha.
So do these things come in like swings in that community where everyone's gonna want red right now and then they're gonna want yellow in like 5 years?
Yeah, everyone's gonna want crazy red designers right now, and then the localities are gonna get scarce, and then they're all gonna want yellow neonate locale stuff or in red. But the yellow neonates see coming back. It's just gonna be a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely a trend that happens in a lot of species that have it's a complex rather than a singular species like ball pythons. Is where when something gets restricted, then you start seeing locality stuff starting to become more prevalent because it's typically rarer. So then it inevitably costs more, and that's what people are more attracted to. You know, you've
Yes.
seen it. Retics were like this. Carpets are like this. I don't know if boas ever picked it up though. I don't know if boas.
No, it happened big time with the boas, I would say. A lot of the
Okay.
locality boa stuff, like the Tarahumaras, used to be super cheap, and then they went up to like $2,000 a pair, and like because everyone started doing a lot of the crazy morph stuff and
Yeah.
forgot about them, and then next thing they know, they're hard to get. So
Yeah.
you kind
Is it
of
the Tamahara, the smallest boa?
yes.
Yeah, of that genus there, because like I thought, because I never had them, but I was always very interested in like I don't know much about boas, but I would look them up, and I do remember those used to. Well, actually, a lot of stuff used to be really cheap. But a lot of the dwarf locale like Central American boas, yeah, they weren't much money, like 125, $200. Like I think like I don't know, 15 years ago, 12 years ago.
Yeah, for
It
sure.
kind of happened with cooler brids too, like the locale stuff. Everybody mixed it. Most people don't have pure locale stuff, and now there's a little bit of a demand, and people are like kind of like nostalgic, and then also kind of just to appreciate the species. You know, it's like, oh, we don't have this locale anymore, and so then that popularity kind of goes up.
Yeah, I think it's always like that nostalgia thing, especially when you start talking to old timers and stuff. People have been doing it for 30 plus years. You know, especially say with the way the morph craze hit, where a lot of times it's hard to get just a wild type looking animal and stuff. And a lot of people I find attracted to you could like this is going to sound crazy. I'm not saying you can make large sums of money off this, but I know there is a small sector of miscellaneous python people that dog on ball pythons, but you best believe you have locality data on a ball python like Stephen Tillis's one he actually handpicked out of the wild. You know, people will pay decent, not like arm and a leg, but they'll pay a whole lot more than just a farm collected or double head, whatever that doesn't sell in the pet trade ball python. So I think every sector has it. It's just to what extent it is, you know.
I think it takes a little while for the people to get appreciated. More so when they start to disappear, you'll see more of it come back around. I mean, I love the pure stuff where you really have locality information in on it, and you can keep your group separate. I hate to mix and match things.
Yeah.
So I'm like, even if it was a ball python, if I could get that locality info, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. But it's not that hard. It's almost one of those, like, if I did it, I'd almost rather do it myself. Like, go and collect my own ball pythons from a different country, not the traditional,
If you go to some rare locale in Africa with a guide and collect ball pythons, holy shit, man, those things will be worth way more than whatever you'll be able to sell them for. I'm terrified to die food poisoning or
right.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna get killed over there, but the food poisoning. Lindy from Freedom Breeder used to talk to my dad, and he told my dad, he goes, "You should come out to Africa with us one time when we go over to these farms." And he said every time he went there, he said no matter how careful he was, he said he'd get diarrhea and he'd be having like straight black watery diarrhea for like a whole week.
Oh, that
sounds
like great.
I don't know why they're like, how is that a selling point on going to Africa to look at ball python? At that point, I'm like, yeah, I'm not fucking going.
I don't know. That's if you really enjoy the species, though. I tell people you're only willing to deal with what you really enjoy working with. So I don't know. If you like ball pythons, I think you'll make the trip because I think just the cultural impact they had too, like with the temples and stuff. I think that stuff's pretty cool, at least to a ball python nerd. Now, if you don't find that interesting, obviously that's a different story.
And
I would like to go from like different countries too, like not the traditional ones that they're usually imported from. I'm talking like western part of the Congo, Senegal, like the furthest west and east part of their range, and maybe a southern, however far south you can go to find them.
I agree with that. That'd be pretty cool because I don't think they ever go. They don't go far out of the
they just stay in that little pocket.
From like you know, I don't know where their extent goes to. Like if they go into like the Ivory Coast or like I know they go into Cameroon, but the Congo sounds pretty.
Well, speaking of the Congo, so do you ever hear about the cave dwarf crocodiles? There's western dwarf crocodiles in the Congo area, and then there's a sector that I guess it got stuck. Like as far as babies can get into the cave, but adults couldn't get back out. So they have a pocket population for I think it was the last 5,000 or 6,000 years where these crocodiles have evolved to be in this cave. And they have these bright, because the traditional western dwarf crocodile is typically a dark, nearly black animal, but the ones found in this cave had this vibrant orange head. You know,
it almost looked like dry clay. It was a weird coloration.
Yeah. How big are they?
They were small. I don't know, 4 or 5 foot. I mean, they're not big, but I mean, big enough to still mess you up if you get bit by one, but not enough to drag you into the water and eat you or anything.
It reminded me of like a dwarf caiman size.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know, but that sounds cool. Yeah, the Congo's like they said a lot of it's like there's a lot of undiscovered species in the dense jungles in the Congo.
You know, maybe there's a ball python that got stuck in a cave and is adapted to eat bats. Who knows?
There's a lot of stuff we probably haven't seen. Like even with Papua, no one goes over to the eastern side.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to think the amount of stuff that we still don't know locality-wise it's there, and even with Africa, some just like Indo and a number of other places, some of those areas are so difficult to get to.
Yeah,
it's like they rarely go out if they can just collect something closer to their location.
Yeah.
I remember with Bushmaster, it's been a while since you saw some of the really odd stuff, but when they had that guy Vladimir working there, you'd get some really oddball stuff. And then even before I was keeping them, some of this, I know some stuff would float in from PNG, but it was rare.
Yeah, some of those PNG southern green pythons, I've seen some with like instead of white, you get almost like a peach or pink looking dorsal stripe. I think those look pretty neat.
There's one, I forget if it's late, I forget what lake locality it was, but it looked like a viridis, but much larger, and where you'd have a lot of that white, there was a ton of melanin. So it was awesome to see. And then I remember there's a picture in a Nat Geo catalog. It's in the northern portion of eastern Papua, and it looked like a cracked out northwestern crossed with a Uterensis. It looked insane and much larger too. So,
like that's another island that I don't think's been that much explored. Was well, maybe it has because of the ring pythons, but the Bismarck Archipelago, like there is no recordings of green pythons on there, right? As far as I know, or it hasn't really been searched that well to see. Because certainly, if there is like a form there, that certainly could be its own species. You know, simply because of the scrubs and obviously the ring pythons. You know,
I think there's none to my knowledge, but I don't think they've done a lot in that area.
Yeah, because there could be, it's an archipelago, so there could be small islands somewhere within the region that, whatever reason, just wasn't explored or looked around at or something like that. Because there was Ari did that expedition, and it was an island to look for Bowen's pythons that were allegedly there, and I think you can find olive pythons. I thought they said green pythons, and I thought there was some sort of scrub too.
I'm trying to think, was it to the north or something?
I can't remember. If he said olive pythons, I'm assuming it's the southern range. I would assume, but again, I'm not 100%. It's been a minute since I've listened to that podcast to know for sure.
That one I didn't hear, so I didn't get to listen to it. I know even when you go get the Bolins from western and eastern side, we don't. They used to come in the 90s, like you could see. There's photos of like Dallas Zoo, I think, had some. They were a little larger instead of primarily that white banding. It was more like a gold yellow appearance.
Right.
So I'm sure they could do even more work and separate a number of the python species in that area.
Right now, they're working on I don't know if Bolins will fit under it, but I know they're working on the scrub complex, because the scrub complex, the Bolins are a part of the scrub complex, but I don't know if they're specifically looking at anything as far as speciation or subspecies divergence between the east or the west. Like Papuan pythons are another one. You can find Papuan pythons on the Bird Heads Peninsula and all the way to the bottom southern part of PNG too. So chances are those are two separate species as well. He might have meant Apodora instead of olives. I can't for the life of me remember. She can listen to the podcast now and tell us what it was, because I don't remember off the top of my head. But he was looking for it because I guess he I don't know, to see if it was anything different or something. I've had Indonesian people send me pictures of it looks almost like a Macklot python in the northern eastern part of the range. But again, after listening to Daniel Latouche, who's to say that some of that stuff wasn't just released? Rather, it was for whatever reason, because they found retics on Papua. And then in Biak, you see a lot of southern species up there, because that was a big hub for exporting stuff. So they would send a lot of the southern stuff up to there. And, sometimes if they had overabundance or more than the quota asked, I think they just re-released them or sent them free out there or something. Because I know they find frills. They found southern scrubs and stuff like that over there.
I've seen that that was going on with tree monitors too. I would see a bunch of guys were posting completely unnative animal in the wrong region, and they were starting to mix people up. And then they're like, now we're starting to see some oddball stuff. And it was someone mentioned it was like, who to say you're not getting hybrids going on now, and that'll start to integrate over time.
Right.
Puerto Rico, I didn't know this until recently, but there's like retics established and doing really well in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, they're not getting large. Like, I think they're only getting to probably around 9-10 feet.
Yeah, they're getting a little bigger, because I've seen some people there was one that subdued a pit bull, and the one person caught one over. His pushing had to be at least 14, 15 foot. So I don't know if they're all, maybe like there's probably like the burbs where it's like you don't see many that are exceeding 10 foot. But
are the boas found on there considered door for smaller locality?
Puerto Rico? There's Puerto Rican boas there. Or are you talking about like the only that I'm aware of in Puerto Rico? I mean, I'm sure there's more, but I just know about the retics a little bit.
They would definitely be a lot of that stuff all the way this far north would be much smaller. Like I don't think you start seeing large imperator until probably Nicaragua or Costa Rica. Like, even when I was in Costa Rica, I was looking for boas there, and people would show me photos of massive ones. I didn't find any. I was like a banana on a boat, but they're I didn't really see. I haven't seen a lot of large stuff until you start getting further down south.
Okay. Well, that might be why too. I mean, if there are any boas, so I always considered retics like the super invaders when it comes to pythons, because they were the pythons that they're more genetically related to Australian stuff that made it past the wall of line into the Southeast Asian part of it. So, and you're starting to see a lot of like, I think Burms used to take a lot of that same native range that we see a lot of the retics at. And I think the retics are just a better predator, just in general, more adaptive to environments in comparison to the Burms. And I think that's why you see like, you got like Sulawesi, and you get on those like Java and Bali and South Sulawesi where you get the dwarf Burms, because they've evolved to take a different niche in the ecosystem where they just stay smaller. And then you got like the retics found in like, was it Borneo, Sumatra, where you don't see Burms and stuff. Well, I think they used to be there, but I think the problem, not the problem, but I think retics has outcompeted them. And if they shrunk down, they couldn't compete with the other python on that island, the short-tailed pythons, that I think are more adapted to those ecological niches compared to a Burm. And now you're starting to see it in Southeast Asia, where you see where Burms and retics are both in the same range. And I think that's why it's such a slow transition and why Burms are still there. Because I remember listening to Reptile Talk, or not, what was it, Snake Talk. It was a podcast on a lot of biologists, and they had someone who did research on wild Burms in their native range. And they said the biggest Burm I'd ever see was like 12, 13 foot. But then when you transition over to like Florida, you get monster Burmese pythons, like huge ones. So I think you're getting where the Burms are shrinking in Southeast Asia just so they can compete with not compete, but still stay in the same region with them.
I think the retics are much more efficient, and
Yeah.
I think the Burms get the reputation for being super invasive specifically because of Florida.
Right.
But if Florida was a little bit warmer and a little more humid, and you let a few retics go, I'm sure you'd be seeing a number of them.
And I think that's another reason too, is why retics won't totally wipe out a lot of their population in Southeast Asia, because they go on the northern, they high, or a bit more on the they get a little higher above the equator, northern part, so they still see temperature swings as far as like similar to what they see in Florida, where they still get cool winters and stuff. But those Burms have evolved to deal with that compared to the retics that haven't, at least not yet, anyways.
I think it gets unless it was like south. I'm sure if you went far enough south, you might be able to get some retics going. But I think as you start going further north, it gets too dry and drastic. I feel like Burms can handle that drier condition a little better than retics would. I feel like a lot of the areas we find retics, it's wet and humid.
Yeah.
Through and through. Like they're a lot of those species, they've evolved to handle such a high moisture level. Then as you start to move away, then we get the Burms, who I feel like if you threw them in a closet for a whole winter, they'll be fine.
Right. No, exactly.
I mean, I always thought the argument back in the day that Burms are really sensitive and they would die very easily for respiratories and stuff like that, at least in the industry. So in the wild, I would have thought they would have started dropping like flies.
Well, they'd show during those cold snaps that sometimes almost half of them would die. The problem is 50% still alive. And then they would just, blossom. And that's the other thing, too. I don't know. That's just a number I heard. Maybe they were off. But the one thing I noticed is, like, sometimes when they find these Burms, they're underneath a bunch of, like, old pine needles and a bunch of other stuff. And so it's like, if it gets down to, like, 35 degrees at night and they go, into, an abandoned burrow, or they get, or they're in the water, where water, it's going to retain a lot of heat, and it's not going to get nowhere near as cold as that air temperature. As long as they can, ride that out, they'll be fine.
They can retain heat pretty well. Like even when you A good example when I saw it is when even when I leave chondros on eggs, that ambient temperature can go down to 75. But if you check in her brood, she can retain the heat to 88. And by the time the heat comes back around the next day and sun's up, they can go back to basking. Like a lot of those large animals, they'll go under some brush like the pine needles, or they'll find a crevice in a tree, and they'll kind of hunker down and retain that heat just until sun's out.
Yeah.
Like when you look at a lot of even the montane python species like bolini, they'll find a little crevice to hunker down in, retain that heat, and then come back out and bask. The
Yeah.
berms are great at it. I feel like from what we've seen in Florida.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
it's
they've adapted very similar to like South African rocks too, where I think sometimes you'll get ones that'll darken up their, really darken up so they can go out and bask for a little while in the early mornings and then go back down to either whatever, if they're hiding in like coconut husk or a burrow or something like that to retain it. Because there's like, you'll see it in pythons where like some, like with green pythons, like if a green python's nice and comfortable, it'll stay in a pretty tight coil. But if it gets too hot, they'll loosen the coils out and
Yeah.
look like they're melting off the perch.
Yeah, they're draped over like a loose rope.
Right.
I mean, even with timber rattlesnakes and cane breaks. Like you go far enough north that you start getting the timbers where they're almost black, and you start moving south, they lighten up. They don't really need as much of that dark coloration isn't as prevalent in those areas because it's not as needed.
Right.
So in those
So
Pennsylvania den spots, though, you get some that'll be melanistic and some will still be yellow. So is that
Yeah.
melanistic mutation that became dominant in that area?
I feel like it's more efficient for them, so that's why you start to see more of it. I mean, I haven't found a ton of them, but I always see photos, even no matter the den size, you always see yellows in there.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's more one side or the other, but I'm not as sure with those populations.
Could be. I mean, they have a isolated population of labyrinth berms. You can see where they'll pluck a labyrinth berm out of the wild, and yeah.
Are you talking Florida right now?
Yeah, he's talking Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, with timbers, Dave. Yeah, I don't. The hypermelanistic ones, I feel like that's more kind of like a locale variant. I don't think it's an actual mutation. It might be a mutation, but I've seen some degrees of the high black one, and since I see some ambiguity there, I'd imagine it's basically natural selection, and so it's really just a polygenic locale phenotype.
Yeah, I think it's just based off the populations. I don't think it's a morph or anything. Because
I think it's a morph.
I think people would have started breeding for it like they do with the Atrox and whatnot. I'm sure by now.
Those are my favorite. If I was to have a timber rattler, I'd want one of the high black ones.
Those are some of the most beautiful ones I ever see photos of.
Yeah, they're cool, man. Like the cane breaks, they're okay. I like them, but a hypermelanistic timber locale, that beats the southern locales in my opinion. Or even the high yellow one. You can show me the nicest high yellow timber. I mean, I'll still pick the one that's mostly black.
Yeah, they're hard not to appreciate. I know there's a lot of them in Pennsylvania. There's a good amount I always see photos of. They're a little mixed or here and there.
You guys all like pythons. We should all go down to fucking Florida and look for berms. Like, that's like I think it's I'd love to find a big Burmese python. So if you guys see that video of the python hunters started looking for berm nests, and almost every nest had more than one python sitting on eggs. They also found old eggshells under this year's nest. So basically, re-nesting in the same den sites, which kind of makes sense. If a snake knows of a good spot to lay, eggs and is a successful nesting site that is comfortable, they're going to know they're going to be able to locate that through just their sense of smell and their innate navigation. But I don't know what she's talking about with multiples nesting. Like there's a female.
Yeah, they would have like a couple females under one like nest pile. Like I've seen it in
male in there too. Like what's going on?
Yeah, well, I've seen it with carpet pythons. Well, they'll lift the thing at 10, and there's like 2 to 3 females nested all around their own clutch of eggs and stuff.
Yeah, so I've seen that, but this one sounds almost like it's like 2 females on one clutch. I don't know. I've never
Now,
seen that.
I have heard of, I don't know how good it is with most other females. I'm assuming they all do it to an extent. But DiNardo did that paper on children's pythons, and the females will wrap other eggs. Like if she's in that nesting mindset, she'll go and wrap up other eggs and stuff, regardless if they're hers or not. They'll even do it for a period of time. They'll do it with, they found little marbles the size of children python eggs and glued them all together to resemble a clutch. And she would wrap the stones up for a period of time until she, I don't know, either realized that nothing was happening, or she could, I don't know, rather it was the end of her, where the eggs would be due to hatch, so she just left. Because some pythons will leave eggs. Like if the environment's good, they'll just leave the eggs for the final stretch, so the female can get right back to, regaining her whatever energy she lost during the incubation period. That was water pythons they did that study with leaving the eggs early.
I've never tried the children. I definitely have a strong maternal instinct. Like when those say the female lays dud eggs or whatnot, she'll sit in that position for majority of the duration of what that incubation process would be without wanting to feed, and then some will completely shut off and be ready for food the next day. But I could see if that animal was in that maternal mode that she would sit on something. I just don't know how likely it would be that they'd be next to each other. Because I will say when their feeding season comes around, they're definitely insane. I've had them grab each other before.
Yeah.
I've had hatchlings eat each other. That happened with my T positive project.
Really?
Yeah, I hatched two at the same time, and I would leave them all together to shed out, just in a moist box. And I guess one of them shed out much sooner than the other and decided to eat one of the T pluses I hatched for the first time.
Right.
So
I've
I learned that the hard way.
I've heard of it with a couple Antaresia that spotted. I've heard it with pretty much all of them. That every once in a while you'll get a cannibalizing babies and stuff. But then they both tend to die in most cases because
they remind me of the little retics. Like if a Antaresia got to 20 feet, I wouldn't own one. They would terrify me. They're genuinely insane.
Well,
When
I
it
tell
comes to
people,
feeding,
I tell people, I go, what's funny is your Antaresia, I guess, are more technically closely related to retics than Burms are to retics. That's just how.
Has anybody done that hybrid yet? A children's with a retic?
I've seen a children's to a blood python. I don't know if anything took, but someone tried.
Could you imagine that, seeing a male children's like locked up with a female retic?
It would look like a male and female anglerfish. You got the big female and the little leech male that attaches to the female. That's what it kind of looked like. That's what the blood python and the children's python look like. I don't know if you want to take that chance though with the children's and a big retic. That would, I don't know. I don't even know.
You'd have to use one of those like super dwarf line retics that was
artificial insemination. I think that's what
it would. I mean, if it took, it only takes 2 generations. You cross it to like a Kalatoa, and then you throw that to a mainland, and you have a monster.
Right.
It wouldn't take long.
Oh God.
And the children, they'll breed at a year old.
Oh yeah.
So you throw that with something with large size, and I mean retics and Burms can breed pretty young though too.
Yeah, you got to be careful with some of those Antaresia though. I tell people it's like they're real easy to get overweight. Like most Antaresia are pretty good with it, but I think when you start talking like pygmy pythons and like pygmy banded pythons, I think especially when they're more reptilian diet, they suffer a lot of the same problems like people would have like black-headed pythons with an overabundance of
like a hog
fat. Yeah, where they just get them too fat. They'll breed, but it's like a lot less or a lower fertility, in comparison.
I feel like we see that with a majority of snakes though. Like everyone loves to feed year round, and a lot of these animals are not eating in this kind of frequency. So when it comes to the reptile eaters, something that's eating such a lean diet, you see it real easily. Like I've had some children that have put on weight fast, and where you notice they're not as good breeders. I like those lean animals are much better breeders and just healthier overall.
Yeah, and it's a bitch to get the fat off of a python once it's fat, because you got to have a happy medium where you can't just fast them for for in a crazy period of time. Otherwise, you'll run into the issue where then once you kickstart that metabolism with all that fat still on them, you can cause like heart attacks and those random instances where an animal eats and dies and stuff like that. So
I've done really long fasts, but I never go with a large prey item. It's always something
yeah.
super small. Like say the animal could eat a medium-sized rat, I would give it a mouse.
Okay,
Nothing
so
just
we'll get back on the green pythons now, because I remember hearing you talk about this before. So I know most green python people are more into feeding rats than mice, but you said you shrink the prey items down when you start feeding the females up for breeding season and just give them more frequent, smaller meals.
Yeah, so when they're in that part of the season towards the end for the most part, they're getting more frequent meals. So I don't give them rats because if I start slamming a female every 4 to 5 days with a rat,
Yeah,
it's gonna get out of hand in less than a month.
yeah.
So I mean, when you look at the studies even Daniel Natusch did, none of those animals were exceeding other than a small handful, even close to 1,000 grams. The
So
majority were 700 or below.
exactly. So my theory with that was too, because I remember I'd always hear the argument is people would say, "Oh, well, they get a rodent the size of a small rat." Well, I think they take into account, kind of like we always fall into this problem, is when we hear about adult size, we always go right over to the largest specimens, not
Yeah.
what they're more likely are in the wild. And let's face it, what is it that triggers a lot of reproduction in pythons? Is an abundance of food. What are they getting as far as an abundance of food of? Not the adults, because the adults were the ones that survived to get through all that, turmoil of the wild. What's more than likely they're feeding more on? Juveniles and, subadults, the animals that are into that growth stage. So they're probably eating a lot more of those smaller prey items more frequently than they are eating the big ones, which I'm sure they do eat, obviously, but they're probably the ones that are kind of those far and in between, where they get one of them and probably don't see another one for a while, compared
Yeah.
to whenever it's breeding season for those mammals. Then that's when they're getting the boom season with the feeding, is they're eating a lot more of those smaller mammals.
With
That's my
chondros
theory
especially.
anyways.
Yeah, they're not getting large prey items.
Yeah,
I mean the when you start moving up past in the small mammal area, they're not going to eat like a bandicoot or whatever. I forget what that mammal's called that
right.
Cole and I'll feed on and a number of the scrubs. Like
Yeah,
they're not going to get to the size where they could move up to there, and there's not many, I would say, large reptiles they're going to start feeding on at that time. So everything's going to be small reptile, amphibian, or rodent, or
yeah,
another mammal species.
yeah,
So they're not getting anything huge. That's why I really prefer to use the mice. And just like the Antarisa, when you get a fat chondro, they're not they're not great breeders.
yeah.
Like a lot of my stuff's much leaner. I don't feed them for 6, 7 months out of the year.
Yeah, that's the same with me. I think too, like especially with chondros being a smaller animal and probably not getting. I think it was the Wilson paper on the green pythons. They weren't very efficient predators, so they weren't really getting all that many meals to begin with. So on top of captivity, giving them bigger meals, you're feeding them more frequent, and that's I think, because I always thought it was weird with chondros when I always would hear people talk about 8 and 10-year-olds just dropping dead after a couple clutches, because it didn't really make sense. I go, why are these animals dropping so young compared to like other pythons where I mean they're living 15, 20 years. Now, granted, yes, some animals are going to die from reproductive events, but why does it seem like that is the life expectancy of an adult female green python? That to me always seemed kind of odd.
I mean, for one thing, I think a lot of people do. I mean, we used to keep them a lot warmer,
Yeah,
and even now, a lot of people will still keep them dry. So I think when you start breeding an animal and keeping under constant stress and now going through breeding cycles, it's not going to live very long.
Yeah.
Like you even see that with emeralds a lot, especially basins. People will go to breed them, whether it be a little younger or whatnot, or they'll dry out the females in the reproductive process, and they wonder why it's like I got one litter and she's dead, or something like that. So I think a lot of that was just keeping them a little improperly. I remember you'd see some massive chondros too, like up
Oh
to
yeah.
three
Size of
thousand
carpet
gram
pythons.
chondros.
Oh yeah, they'd be the size of big female carpet pythons. I mean,
Oh
I
yeah,
would see people with. So I keep my female carpets in 3x2x2s, and I would see green python people keeping that same size enclosure with their green pythons. I'd be, God damn, it's the same size as my carpet pythons sitting on the perch.
yeah. That's
So
where you'll see. That's where you start to see the more constant feedings or just the large prey items. I think as I've moved away from rats, I really don't have any large females like that. I have one animal that I acquired in like a lucky circumstance. I went in somewhere to pick up something and saw this massive biok, giant animal, and that's probably the only large one I have, and that was only from being fed like a monster its whole life.
and you keep your stuff seasonal like Vin does. So you don't
Yeah.
feed you like I said, you fast for a period and then you feed them fairly heavy for a certain part of the year. So you keep them in that season compared to where it sounds like not all green python people, but it's like definitely some of the green python people will feed more consistently. So they always call it their animals aren't seasonal. I go, well, it's because you don't treat them seasonally. If you treat them seasonally, they'll act seasonal. I say the same thing with ball pythons too. I go, if you treat a ball python seasonal, it'll act seasonal. You
Oh,
know?
I feel like these animals have evolved to work off a certain seasonality. So
Yeah.
you when you start to keep them in a constant state of confusion, it doesn't really work well with getting them to breed consistently. That
Right.
was the biggest thing I noticed. Like it would be a coin flip when I would try pairing stuff and kept them in a non-seasonal manner. But once I started to move over to they all get fed the certain times, they're all off feed by here, getting fed here. Then you started to see, all right, they all kind of honed in. And I remember last season, all my females, except for one or two, laid within a 6 week period.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's off feed from October now until about May.
And at that time, do you change the temperatures at all?
The adults will get the cooler night swings. Once they hit about three subadults, I start to keep them like adults. So they'll get night swings, but that kind of stops around March, and then I start to bump up the. I'll gradually bump up temps prior to then, but for the
What's
most part,
a cool night swing, like 68 or
I mean the coldest I go is 72.
okay?
72. That's under the heating element. So I'm sure the rest of the enclosure could get a little cooler, but my room never goes below that. It's very rare. 69 would be the coolest that room will get here in New York. Um, I feel like a lot of those cooler temps aren't necessary. I don't give them a long period of heat though
Yeah.
during breeding season. They're only getting heat for 6 to 8 hours. Sometimes I'll cut it even shorter.
Yeah. I think that's the problem most people have is with pythons is you tend to if you keep them too hot is where you run into more problems and too
Yeah,
cool.
you always have an elevated metabolic rate. In the wild, they're not getting perfect high temps, like 24/7. That's the same problem with my hognose or other people's hognose snakes. They just keep them too hot constantly. And then so they're giving them a big metabolic spike just with temperature, and then they're giving them the food to exacerbate it. So you got two things compounding it. You got the high temps and oversaturation.
I think what you're describing, I think, is just the same problem because I've gotten the last year or so, I've gotten a lot of newer ball python people messaging me about males I have, asking a little older males too, and asking like, yeah, my male just up and rolled, or he start crashing and stuff like that. And the only thing that can come to mind, particularly with pythons, is because they do have their organs do need to have a rest period. They've evolved to be that too fast. And then in captivity, we feed them weekly, bi-weekly, which it takes about 2 weeks for that whole digestive cycle to end, is about 2 weeks. But if you're feeding weekly or bi-weekly, that means as soon as it stops, it feeds. As soon as it stops, it feeds. Or if you're feeding weekly or multiple times a week, well, then it's never stopping. So essentially, that animal's metabolism and all the pressures of the thicker blood and plasma and increased organ sizes is just as exacerbated for an extended period of time, and you never give them. And then on top of that, you breed them and you keep them hot year round. I think that's why a lot of people are having, not a lot, but people in ball pythons in particular have issues with males crashing. And then I hear the occasional like, oh, well, not all of them do it. Well, again, you don't keep all those males long enough to see if they have those issues a year or two down the line from them.
I notice a lot of the time it's like, especially with ball pythons or a number of other species, but ball pythons are a great example. Those males will breed to no extent, some really good males. So if you're keeping them too warm in a season where they'd naturally be cooling down and reserving some of their energy and calories, they're cooking through that while working off an excess amount of energy. So that I feel like that's where you really start to see stuff crash.
Yeah.
When you got too much going on at once, that's not natural. So the body can't handle it.
Yeah, especially if you got females cycling year round because you feed them constantly. So the females are always in flux on where they're going and what time of the year they're going. So there's other triggers that are causing them, because food obviously isn't the biggest cause when you do feed that consistently. So I think that's another reason too, is because you always, when you keep it a season, well, more than likely your females are going to go in a period of time, and then obviously you get a few outliers that do go later. But occasionally, but most of the time they're stuck in a season. So those males only typically smell those females in that duration of time. And then the rest of the year, it's just kind of, they're just doing whatever, restoring, saving energy for the following year.
I would say that's super accurate, because especially with the chondros, those males will shut off once they start to smell the females.
Yep.
Entering that process. Like I have males, you could smack that thing with anything. He won't take it. Give him a few months, temps warm up, and he starts to kind of come out of that mode. He'll grab anything again.
Right.
So I think when people start to keep them out of that natural cycle, they're confused. So the smallest variation can set them off, and now you have one female going in September, and then two in January, and then some entering the late spring and summer.
Yeah.
Like, I never really see that. For the most part, it's all are in a time period, and then you get the few outliers. Like I have one female I can bank on always going 2 months early. Drives me nuts. But
right.
yeah. My most important female loves to she would always push her cycle back, so I had to start to fight her on that and mess with the feeding a little bit.
Do you ever use multiple males on females?
If it's a locality pairing, I would, but I wouldn't put them together. Like, I'd never put two chondros together. I have a few that if you put those males with another male, they'll kill it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
territorial.
They'll slash. Yeah, definitely for sure. I didn't start seeing a lot of territorial behavior until I started keeping imports, because a lot of the times with the designers, they're mutts. You're crossing different subspecies, so you lose a lot of that natural instinct, at least in my opinion. Like with some of these import males, they'll come up to the front door when they're with a female and just tense, not looking for food. They'll just gonna take a swing at you. But I've had, for the first time, I accidentally had two males, and you could see once they smell each other, they'll go at each other.
They'll start
really
biting
quick.
at each other?
Yeah, they'll just start swinging. And it doesn't take long. Once they smell that, it reminds me of almost like when retics, you always hear how aggressive they are come breeding season. It's like, I didn't expect that, but I've seen it with a few of them. A few of those animals get a little nuts.
Doing 1.1s then.
Yeah, I like to keep 1.1. So a lot of people will try, like I've had it where I've bred one male to, I've gone for 3 females, but the most he got to was 2 1 year. And I don't like to do that. If I can, I prefer 1.1. I'd rather just have that male in from the beginning of season until she's I know she's completed, gonna ovulate, and he can come out.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, unless I'm short with a specific project, I'll leave that male in until the process is over.
We have Lisa asked a question here. Have you had a male that refused to breed? Is there a trick to deal with those kind of males?
So I'll say something that's more controversial then. So I will put two males together, and I do this with carpet pythons too that are well known to tear each other up. But the difference is most green python people have a fairly basic setup, so you don't have places for males to get away and hide. So what I noticed with my Darwins, because I had this problem with my two albino Darwins not wanting to breed the het female, and I just decided to throw them together and just leave them in there. And they would never show initial aggression with each other. So I would just forget, honestly, I would just forget they were in there together. And at some point, I would start seeing breeding happening. Well, I'd look at the males and I'd start seeing they had some slash marks on them. And I was like, oh shit, I guess they were fighting with each other. But after that, I never saw any kind of aggression because what typically happened was one male would hide while the other male was with that female, and then if he ever decided to hide, he might come out and hide with the female, and they would go back and forth because they had like at least three different places they could actually hide and get away from the male. So if you're gonna do it, you want a big enough enclosure, enough places to where they can get as far away from each other as possible. Yeah. Because if you keep them in like a tub setup, or if you kept them in a more of a basic like green python setup, then yeah, they probably, if they can't get away from each other or they're constantly near each other, then yeah, I think a lot of times it'll cause some issues. And then it's probably individual basis too, where I've seen it even with retics. I remember helping Ben one time. He was sending one male retic to a buddy, a breeder male, and he had another breeder male, and he had to swap their cages because he was giving them the cage too. So we swapped the cages and we cleaned it out and everything and disinfected it. And the one male just got real crazy, started flinging the water bowl, trying to bust up the glass. And then the other male just didn't give a care in the world, nothing changed in his world compared to the other one. So it seems very individual based. I sometimes wonder if it's a size thing, where if it's a smaller male, they're not going to win any battles with other python males. So it probably just is safer for them just to stay on equal and decent terms with other males, and then they kind of co-breed or group breed like in anacondas. But then I think once you get to a certain size range, I think that's when it triggers more of a combative stage. Because I've noticed the bigger the males, I've seen more fighting or more combat-like behavior, even with smaller males. But if you kept them both small, it's not a guarantee either. Because I've had small males, whatever reason, they just get a wild hair up their ass, and they're just like, I don't want you near me.
Yeah, I have a few small males that I tested it once. I had one like with Antaresia and a number of other species. I'll put two males in and let them combat. Usually, it's not, you won't see any slashing, so I'll allow it, especially with children's pythons.
Right.
But with the chondros, I remember I put a small male in with I'd say in male that was easily twice its size, and that little thing went up to it, started smelling, just started swinging for the hills.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so I think it's definitely individual based. Like you'll get some animals that are much just better breeders than others. And then you'll get some that you have to basically play Barry White in the background to get them to go.
Right. Right.
With the difficult males, I feel like a lot of that is like if you're not like, I love seasonal keeping, so I'll try to refine his cycle for that year or mess with it a little bit and tweaks to try to make it a little more intriguing for him to go the next year. I've had males though that were difficult to get going, like they didn't go for 2 or 3 years.
Do you find it differentiates between wild caught and captive bred?
The imports, I mean, I love them. I really like if I with a lot of localities, if I have the option, I'll still take the import over a captive bred baby.
Okay.
I feel like you've kind of weeded out a lot of the weaker genetics, and you get this little perfect snake plucked out of a tree. I mean, there are definitely more work, but uh, I've noticed I mean, they're all locale animals. A lot of the other captive stuff I've had were crosses, so I find it hard to base a lot of my opinion on the crosses. But based off the locale stuff, they seem to be a little more intense. Like that one male that I was talking about that was swinging for the hills at a much larger animal, that was an import with a captive animal. I'm not saying this would hold true all the time, but that was the circumstance with that.
Dave, you got anything to say? You're awfully quiet.
Well, turkeys don't talk.
What was that, Junior?
I said turkeys don't talk, so you're playing the role pretty good.
Yeah. I enjoy just listening, guys. I'm taking it all in. We're all here for a reason to listen to you guys talk. I'm genuine when I say that.
I do that when we go to dinner at Tinley. I usually am pretty quiet and I'm just listening to everyone else.
Yeah, because you have the legendary Vin Russo, man. I know how that used to be. You'd have like these legends or people that have been in the hobby long enough. They all know each other, and you're the new kid on the block, just like a fly on the wall, just listening.
Yeah, there's a lot. I still sometimes I catch myself doing that where I'm like, we're dead silent. I'm just staring.
Especially when they start talking about shit that happened back in the 80s and 90s. I go, shit, I wasn't even born then.
I get fed up at this point when I hear it. They're like, oh, I was able to get this locale or this species. I'm like, well, I don't care anymore because we can't get it, and I don't want to hear about that.
That's when you look at them and you go, well, you're the asshole that didn't keep it going, so I don't want to hear it. That's what I tell people. I go, well, it was your job to keep it around. Now that it's not around anymore, then whose fault is it now? You know.
Yeah,
some of the stuff was really cheap too. My dad would tell me how, like, like Indian star tortoises for like $30 and stuff like that. Radiated tortoises, like very affordable. I can't remember the price, but a lot of stuff. My dad was mainly he did a lot of tortoises, so. But yeah, like everything was like spider tortoises were like $100, $150.
Oh yeah, I mean even pythons. I mean most scrub pythons were hardly worth anything. Bull and I were actually reasonable back then. We thought they were crazy expensive. Lord behold, that 2020 hit, and we're like, oh god, now they're really expensive.
Yeah. Well, I asked about the green trees and doubling up on males or even tripling up because of like so many species where it seems to be the trick when you can't get them to breed, like green anacondas. And if you ever look at a documentary, footage of green anacondas, like whether it be like Venezuela or like Panama, they show like a bunch of males on a female. It's always a big nesting. And then Bolins, it seems like the secret now is like multiple males. So, but I know they're morally are different. These green trees, I didn't know. That's why I was asking.
I would say it's more a boa and python thing. You can get away with using multiple males with boas, but when you start to go to pythons, pythons combat. So there's always one male that's gonna seem to do it. You will never see like a breeding bull with pythons. I would say maybe with bull pythons, but
diamond pythons for whatever they tend to do it, and South African. It seems to be animals that are found in more cooler climates, like the South African rock.
The Bolins, isn't that to see that what they've been doing to get successful clutches? They've been using multiple males.
Yeah, Scott's been. I remember I was asking him about it at Tinley. He'll like rotate two males through, but he always keeps an eye on them because if they start to slash each other, I know he said he'll separate them.
Okay, so usually they will combat, and then he moves them if they get two.
Yeah, I know it said they'll start to go at it with wrestling for the most part, but you'll get, I'm sure, some animals that just take a swing. I don't have them. I'm just going off what I've spoken to him before about, but that seems to be the case. It definitely will get them going. Like I've used males just so I don't take the risk. I've used sheds from other males and thrown it in there, and it seemed, I mean, it definitely had an effect a few times I tried it. It seemed like, but I rarely would ever throw the males together. I'm just afraid of one taking the wrong hit on another or hitting it in the eye, something like that.
And then you occasionally have those males that will only breed when that female's at a certain point in her follicular development, and he'll breed. I know I've seen a particular. I don't know if it's just older animals that do that. I know Ben said his original ghost retic, he would only breed the females right before they end up reproducing, and he said he would breed once, and then the female would end up going through the whole cycle and laying a good clutch. So I think that's, I've seen it with a few species where it's like a one and done. They do it once and that's it.
Well, I think you end up with some males they'll breed a rope if it smells like a female.
Yeah.
But then like when it comes to males like that, those are animals that they're not going to breed unless they smell the females ready.
Yeah.
It seems to be, you could run into that with a lot of species, but I have one or two males that do that, but for the others seem to be a little dumb. They'll breed a female shed and think it's something else.
Right.
I got a few in there that if I threw a shed on a French bulldog, they'd wrap its leg.
Yeah. I've always wondered that with certain pythons too, where like you get those males that are triggered by some female, especially when you keep like a wide variety of different species, particularly pythons. And then you have other pythons going through a follicular development, and then the males smell, like I had my rough-scale python do that, where he just went off food and he would keep pacing the tub. But I was like, the female's not developing anything. Like she's not going through a reproductive cycle. And he would breed that female, but nothing ended up happening. And I'm like, I wonder if something else nearby is triggering him, and that's just what's getting him excited.
Was he near carpet pythons?
Oh yeah, he was near carpets, and
I feel like something that if they would smell a pheromone of a species that they could technically hybridize with, it might send them into cycle. But I'm sure with like if I put like a children eye next to like a green tree, I don't think I would send them into it. I don't think it would have any effect if they smelled one female of the other species going in.
Right.
But I think if it's something that can cross, especially like a rough scale you could definitely cross a rough scale with like a jungle or a Darwin or whatnot.
Oh, so it's been done before.
Yeah,
I was
about to say, well, William, that's your sign to start hybridizing.
No, please don't.
Right.
Please don't.
Here we go.
Please don't.
That's
the problem is with the
hybridizing. Now, I bring this up every now and then. If anybody's listening to me, I do want to see this one hybrid. For the love of God, somebody please breed an African rock to a mainland blood python. It'll be hilarious.
Oh God.
I feel like we do not need more rock pythons.
African rock, mainland blood. It would be the coolest, nastiest hybrid.
No, that's what I'm saying. Rock pythons are demon spawn. Why do you want more of them?
I think you run into the problem. I think it would end up like a Indian or Sri Lankan python, where you get the size of the rock python and the personality of it, but it might act more like a wild blood would, which is similar to the Indians and Sri Lankans, where they do that stupid death roll shit in your hands. And then they try to
the Sri Lankans are like really pretty, and then you're like, oh, barely anybody has them. And then when you tell me about them, I'm like, fuck, now I understand why barely anybody.
If I had someone to take a video of it, I'd show you a video of how crazy this female gets. Anytime human hands touch her, it's like immediate spaz out and then shit on you and then bite you afterwards.
Yeah, my girlfriend Crystal, we have this T-negative albino blood python that I didn't want to win at a U.S. ARC auction, but Phil Goss counted somebody else's bid, and I got the last one. I'm like, somebody else will bid it up. No, I want it. And so I said, you can have it. You know the Muppets, like the show? You ever they show the Muppets that like spaz out with their mouths like that? That's what this stupid blood python does anytime you put your hands on it. It's weird. It's like, it starts like trying to barrel roll, and it's like, I feel like when pythons usually bite in defense, they're usually kind of precise. They go, they rear back and they lunge and they get you. This thing's like a spazzing Muppet, it feels like when you touch it, it looks like it's getting tased or something. Its mouth is just going like this, and it's just trying to swing. And so Chris was like, "You're not gonna pick that up." And she was like, "I was like, yeah, I was." I was like, "Watch, I'll pick it up." So I picked it up, and then it bit me. She goes, "See, you got bit." And I'm like, "Well, you said I wouldn't pick it up." But yeah, it wasn't even like real nasty bite because it wasn't even putting power into it. It was just like it looked like the thing was being tased.
Oh yeah, good old blood pythons.
Viper boas are like that. They just start, you touch a viper boa and it's just gonna smack you from the side, backwards, and just it's extremely spastic. Borneos were like that too. They hated being touched.
Yeah, mine don't. Yeah, mine are probably the most spastic out of the short tails of the Borneo.
Yeah, I remember clean them. Yeah, I'd clean them, and the minute I touch the thing, you'd think it's like a colubrid. It comes flying out of my hand. If you keep them moist, they're nice and they're very smooth. So that thing does not like being touched.
Oh, so it comes in right at this point. Great timing. But yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah, they I wouldn't. If you come to think about it, the bloods and they nest a lot like berms would too.
Yeah.
They'll go on like a lot of the photos, even carpets. I'll see them under large amounts of leaf litter. I mean, I'm sure berms would do it given the option, but where they are, they in Florida, they're just getting pine needles or whatever you may have it. But it seems like a lot of those animals tend to really hunker down in a moisture spot and try to hold through.
Yeah. I've always liked the theory behind the blood pythons too, where you know how you get a couple of them that'll hold in fecal matter for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And the competing theories was either one, they'd either use it as leverage for biting and striking, and the second one I think it could be a little bit of both, is using it to locate their hunting spot. Like if they poop, now their whole their ambush area smells like them. So then that makes them have to go travel to go to a different area. Compared to if they held it in, they can utilize a spot for a longer period of time.
I feel like a lot of it would be like, I mean, they don't move, so you won't get a lot of pressure on trying to get that fecal matter out. And I think a lot of the times when they come in, like those animals are another one. They're always in a moist, humid climate. A lot of times you'll see people throw them on newspaper in a dry room, and now they've gone from sitting in, they're just like chondros for the most part, an 80-90% humidity range to 40 to 50. So they get constipated, just like if you don't drink water for a few days and you start eating food the whole time, it's not gonna come out.
Right.
That's what I was just thinking. I wonder if you like soak them more, if they shit more often. Because I have a few short tails. Now, 99.8% of my collection is hoggos for very good reason. But I do own 3 Sumatran short tails, and they shit pretty often. Not that often, but like, I feel like every 1 to 2 months there's a pretty decent turd in there. But I'm keeping it on pretty wet cypress mulch. And sometimes they spill their bowls too. It's always pretty wet.
They love moisture. If you put them in an enclosure, I feel like if you put them in an enclosure that's dry, like on shavings or whatever you may, even dry cypress, they're gonna start to sit in the water bowl and dump it out and try to create that moisture. Like viper boas were like that too. If you put the viper boa's bin was starting to get dry, they create a mess. They swamp it out. The bloods were a lot like that too. They liked that swampy condition.
Yeah.
Because like wherever you see them coming from, they're always they're always going to be extremely well hydrated. That animal's not really going through a hardcore dry season like a ball python or something would.
You mentioned something that reminded me of Ryan. Ryan used to say a long time ago. He used to say, he's like, you know what's funny is I actually got a lot of my breeding chondro information from blood pythons, where they didn't do well hot, they didn't do well if you overfed them, and they, like you said, they like it pretty humid too. So he's like, it's funny that you got 2 opposite ends of the spectrum, yet keeping and reproductive wise are actually fairly similar to each other.
A lot of those I feel like a lot of the species in those areas they've evolved in a humid, moist climate, just like when you go to boas and you start moving further south and you get near the Amazon. Like they can't handle being dry. I feel like could confidently say anything from those areas, if you start to dry them out and keep them in an opposite to what they're used to, they're not gonna do well. Like with chondros, you'd always see people will say like oh, this one's it won't, it's backed up and it's tail hanging. I know we always see it with emeralds too. It's because they get dry and now you got a dehydrated animal. It's not going to poop. But I think with until the bloods get larger, they'll poop a little more frequently. Like mine don't, they don't go all the time. But as they start to get larger, I feel like as they move less and they're not getting as frequent of those small meals and whatnot, they're more so relying on a few big meals every year. They're not going to need to poop as frequently. I just think if they come in like it's a wild animal that came in and that animal was loaded up with crap and then it gets dried out, that's going to be in there for a lot longer.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of like hydration and Dave, when we talked a short bit before the podcast, we were going to talk about like UV, and the one thing was too is like, and I've heard this before. I've actually heard it with like hognose snakes that people would see that their animals had better coloration when they kept UV. And I don't think it's really quite the lighting. Like, well, lighting, different types of lighting will make an animal appear a different way because you're getting a different type of like light refraction, whether you're using, there's incandescent bulbs, there's LEDs, there's UV. But a lot of the coloration in animals, skin has to do with dietary, if they're getting enough like beta carotene, carotenoids, and then hydrated animals. So if you have a well hydrated animal, and it's going to make the overall health, of the scales look a lot more, it's going to look a lot better.
Yeah, you see it easily with tree boas and tree pythons. If they're dehydrated, they look like crap. But then if I leave it and let it get hydrated for 2 days, it almost looks like a different animal.
Right. Yeah. So anytime you see an animal that's like dehydrated, you could see it. Like the coloration is a lot more dismal. The reflective like luster you might get, let's say on like a rainbow boa, isn't going to be there. And a rainbow boa that's like a bit dehydrated and its scales are dry. So the one thing is like the overall coloration being bolstered on an animal is going to be due more to dietary factors. Even like species like this is kind of outside of my realm of like I'd say expertise, but like trying to think of them. Uromastics. They eat, a lot of foliage. They eat, flowers, and there's a lot of carotenoids in, some of these type of green diets. And the more of these carotenoids they get, they're going to have actually improved coloration because it actually gets stored in their pigment cells in their body. The pigments in their bodies, like yellows and reds, aren't really produced through just the mechanism of a pigment cell. The pigment cell is fueled by dietary supplement like carotenoids. And so you could actually, if you give an animal, so like kind of like let's say like flamingos, when they're feeding on shrimp and krill, or I don't know, I think it's just shrimp. I don't think they eat krill anyway. But that beta carotene you get from them fuels that pink saturation, that coloration in their feathers.
You see it even with fish. Like a lot, I know a lot of, like, I'm not a fish guy whatsoever, but I know with a lot of species, like you can get specialized diets that have certain vitamins and nutrients that others don't, and it completely changes their appearance. I think with reptiles, it definitely applies the same way. Just you have UV now incorporated. So it seems like you need to have both to get that effect where we start to see these imported animals that look insane. Or like I know Ryan Young just posted some beautiful looking pythons from a trip he was on. It's like one centralian and I think some blackhead, a few things. I forget what else, but you don't get that appearance without having both of those correlate, because I've noticed like with chondros and a number of other things, people will keep them with UV, but you don't start to see that correlating really insane phenotype bleed through, where it's like you get these animals that don't even look like their wild counterparts. I think it comes down to then the diet. Like us in captivity, we're not feeding them stuff that they're going to be getting naturally from small reptiles that they might be eating that are eating insects and feeding on all these different new minerals and what vitamins, or even rodents feeding on different, having a completely different diet than what the stuff we give them. So it's like, I think to get that real effect, you need to have both.
Do you
And
supplement your green trees, Prey?
I can't say I'd be lying if I said I do.
Okay.
I mean, even if there was a small time period, probably 10, 15, 12 years ago, more closer to like 2012 or 13, I tried UV with multivitamin and calcium. I didn't really see any difference that was noticeable. I really feel like if you're feeding a healthy rodent, it's going to still acquire that same calcium and stuff we're going to give them. I think a lot of the stuff missing are certain, I guess, minerals or nutrients they'll get from their prey items diet that's in that region, and which definitely varies from area to area.
So, Kenny, do you know, or did you try that with adult animals or baby animals?
Adults.
Green pythons, adults. See,
Yeah.
I've tried something similar because pinkies are a horrible food source. They're just
Yeah.
water balloons. So sometimes, like with my Antaresia and this year with the baby rings, is I'll take the back end of a frozen thaw and I'll dip it into this vitamin calcium supplement, and I'll just offer that. There's at least to give it a little, because obviously there's nothing else outside of lizards. There's nothing else you can really feed those. I know you're a strong proponent on feeding baby lizards to those that don't take the pinkies right away, which I think
Yeah.
is personally like, if I could readily get lizards on a consistent basis, I would definitely opt out on feeding lizards, because most of these, particularly pythons in particular, go through an ontogenetic diet shift in the wild. Like
Yeah.
green pythons will get more robust heads, and for to compensate for mammal hips compared to a lean lizard or something like that. A lot of Antaresia are the same way. They'll go through that ontogenetic diet shift from reptiles to mammals. So
Yeah, I remember with hatchlings, like for one season, I tried dipping the butts in calcium. But at this point, I get them off of pinkies so fast. Like I always start with live prey items so they get good bacteria and flora in their system. I feel like without that, and you just go into the frozen prey items, you get that wet, loose uh, stools. So I get a few pinkies in them, and I feed those. I feed hatchlings and neonates pretty frequently. I've done every 3 to 4 days for almost a year. And then that shift comes where they naturally taper off and I completely cut them off. And now they're at once every week or two. And then they move on to the adult behavior. But
so when it comes to feeding too, are you opposed? Because I've never raised baby green pythons. Are you opposed to feeding them a larger prey item? Because I know with a lot of my pythons, I'll push their bodies to eat larger prey items, less frequent, but just to get them that change. There seems to be a change. Like if I give them one big, not like to where they're going to explode, but not to where it's like a damn, I'm shocked you got that down kind of prey item.
I've done that a few times where like I grab a fuzzy out of a bin I'm cleaning or a pinky and I'm just like, oh, this thing's due to feed. And then it nails it so quick and I look at it wrapped up on it, I'm like, this is a bad idea. I hope you don't throw this up and it's too big.
Right.
They can handle it 100%. I think the biggest fallacy is that, oh, if you feed a chondro or even a baby emerald something big, it's gonna prolapse. It's like that. I've never had one prolapse. Like I remember me and Ben like went through cards one day and it was over 100 animals. None of them prolapsed. And like he's going off his years and then all the animals I've had, the only animals I've ever seen prolapse were dehydrated. So I think people are afraid to do it because a lot still keep them much drier. So they'll get prolapses pop up here and there. So then they think, oh, if I give it a big meal, I'm definitely kind of guaranteeing a prolapse. I mean, for the most part, I try to give them the biggest meal they can handle as hatchlings.
Yeah.
I don't really steer away from that. I only do the smaller items when I'm doing frequent feedings.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
That's exactly what I do. I'll try to grow quickly, for younger animals, I'll give them bigger meals less often, because I think too what ends up getting a lot of people in trouble with big meals is when they start feeding animals already have an accumulation of fat buildup, and then you feed it something real big, and then all that tax going on inside their body on top of the fat sitting on those organs. I think that's when people get in trouble, especially with retics and stuff. I hate to bring retics up again, but I think,
no, they're a good example. They're a lean body for sure.
Exactly. Well, I remember hearing Ben Russo say this long time ago on a podcast. He goes, I think people are doing the retic shit all wrong. If they want a monster, you got to feed it like a monster. You don't feed it a 20-pound rabbit. You feed it a foal or a calf. If you want to get those true, like, big, like those monster retics you see, because there's something to do. I can't quantify this to a degree, but you do see, like, well, why do island retics stay small, but yet in captivity we get them real big? Well, if you look at the way they feed them in captivity, they're feeding them pigs, rabbits, where in the wild, if they're staying around caves, probably their primary food source is bats and maybe occasional rodent. So they're probably eating a bat, typically depending on the species, anywhere from like an adult mouse to a small rat. So if that's all they're eating, they're probably eating a bunch of them at once rather than eating just one giant prey item that I think causes more growth, because it doesn't make sense for if a Calicoa retic or whatever gets 12 foot long, well, now it can't sustain itself off of a handful of bats compared to if it was 5 to 6 foot long.
Yeah, because hypothetically, one of them could sit there and nail as many, say, a dozen bats in one night and do it again, but you're not getting that real insane amount at once. Like,
exactly. I tell people there's a difference between a football gut compared to a sausage link. Because if you're just stuffing small prey items, it doesn't grow girth. It just grows, it looks like a stuffed sausage essentially in comparison.
Somebody clipped that motion.
Oh, sorry.
Like, if you think about it, though, it's same thing as like with any of the massive snake species. They're not taking smaller meals frequently. Like anacondas are nailing a caiman or a capybara, something that's very large, and it's going to sit there with a massive meal in its stomach for some time. African rocks, like they'll nail small gazelles. I've seen them nail decent sized ones too. Even like Vingate taught me a really good great species was he taught me with like hog islands. Even those females, though, they grow really slowly and feeding on the prey items they can at the time, but once they get to that size where they can nail a tenosaur, that's when they go into that reproduction process. It really starts to make them grow, and it really jumps that speeds that rate up.
We see it in Imbricata in the southwestern carpet python, where you see there's an island where the only prey items is either mice or a wallaby the size of a rabbit, and that's the only two prey items they have. Well, the males stay small enough to only eat mice. Well, the females eventually get big enough to where they can take on those larger prey items. And a lot of times it's there isn't like a set size. It's what animal is willing to take down this prey item, choke it down, and live to see another day. Because pythons don't have that, like, oh, this is too big for me. They go for it, or they don't live long enough to do it. So they'll force like meals that they couldn't eat. Daniel Latouche said they would find like a 4-foot scrub python trying to eat a pointer, a dog, like overpower the dog and try to eat it. So it clearly wouldn't have been able to eat it, but yet it's trying to grow as quickly as possible. Because they want to get out of that neonatal stage to at least move up the food chain so they're less likely to get preyed on.
That's why, like, a lot of the animals, when they're younger, I feed them much more frequently for that first year, because naturally they're going to try to put on as much size as they can to ensure their survival. But if you keep feeding them that way past that point, you're like, how did I end up with this sausage of a snake? Where I see, it doesn't surprise me. They're insane. They'll definitely try.
That's a scrub eating a kangaroo.
They'll eat stupid sized prey items.
I mean, even the water pythons, I've seen them do some like small crocodilians. There's a few photos
you're
of that.
talking about Baron Eye. That's the Western olive, Pilbara olive. Those are the big ones that eat the freshies and stuff.
Yeah, you'll see them on the rock crevices cranked down, and it's impressive.
Oh yeah.
That's me trying to get all my clothes to fit in my backpack for a trip.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly what I do too.
So I can only take one carry-on. And then you're trying to get one fucking carry-on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I think I'm with you though. I think because I remember hearing Vince say that, and I thought that was like there was something to it because even in captivity, I mean, with Hog Islands, Warren Booth has said he's seen 8-foot Hog Island boas because.
Oh yeah, the Bronx Zoo by me has one that is so freaking large it shouldn't exist. It was like 7-8 feet, and I look at it, I'm like, this would never happen.
Exactly, because I think that's what we're talking about. It doesn't make sense if this animal outgrows its prey source, well then it'll die. So I think there's a difference between frequent small prey items compared to large, eating one large prey item in comparison.
Hey Kenny, do you raise your own rodents for your green trees?
I get mice from Vin who breeds them, and then I have some rats. I don't want to have mice and rats in the room. I mean, with the space available at the moment, it would be a little much. But I definitely prefer to. I just give them Missouri diet, so it's pretty good. But I don't really do anything beyond that. I don't like to buy I don't buy any stuff that's shipped overseas or whatnot. I just always buy stuff that's if I can't get it, I'll get it from someone I know or breed them myself. I mean, I do the same thing with the crested geckos. I have 2 colonies of those for the same reason. And when I start to get to an excessive amount, I just freeze them off. Keep all the sizes I need, just so I always have something for what I'm breeding.
Yeah,
you guys have trouble sourcing rats in New York?
Say that again?
Do you have any trouble sourcing rodents in New York?
No, we have someone by us that always has stuff we need, just not occasionally it might not just be massive size rats, but everything else is pretty readily available. I don't use anything other than mice and rats though, so I don't go into the quail and ASF area. We could get ASFs pretty easily. The only thing that I would say I'd have to get shipped would be stuff like quail and whatnot.
Yeah. I like to have quail on hand, but I hardly ever use them. It's like rarities. I just pull them out for specialty things.
I mean, for a lot of the stuff, I'm I have them on such a specific feeding regimen that throwing the quail in would throw that off, and then I just end up with this messy turd that smells and is.
Throw Dave in there dressed like that.
Oh, God.
It is
he'll definitely mess up the gut biome.
Do you think a scrub python would try to take Dave dressed up like that?
Absolutely.
What is it? Keithorn? I'm probably pronouncing. Yes, Kinghorn. I don't know why I was thinking Keithorn. You get a large enough one of those, I feel like it would go after Dave.
Right. Maybe. I think.
Yeah, those things are the Kinghorn get really big. They can be over 20 foot long, but then they're somehow only that big around.
Yeah.
I've seen the one that Stephen Cush had. I think his biggest one was I don't know. I don't want to be wrong, but I thought it was around 15 or 16 foot. Yeah. Dude, it coiled up. That wasn't even that big coiled up.
I got a
such
southern
long, lanky snakes.
I got a southern scrub python that's in a CB. She needs to be moved into a cage, but in a CB70, she curls up, and when you pull her out, you go, "Holy shit! There's so much snake coming out of this tub right now." It's 7 foot or so.
Yeah, they're a good example. It's a lean python. They're not. That's another animal. It's not meant to get fat. I can't imagine someone feeding that enough to really get to that point.
Oh, there was a guy in Australia. He had a kinghorn eye that was it was big, but you could definitely tell it was overweight. I mean, this thing had, you can tell when a python in particular gets overweight because they they can't constrict normally because their necks are too thick to actually move to wrap anything up properly. That's where they have to start using the environment to crush their prey.
Yeah.
They just can't constrict it. Well, in the wild, it's probably not like that. But in captivity, you'll notice they'll have to use like the side of the tub or something like that to help kill the prey item.
Yeah, so, like crank into a corner and like
just kind of like a colubrid would. Some colubrids would.
Oh yeah, I got a good idea. African rock time scrub python.
that'd be horrific. And I don't know. Rock pythons are pretty accurate to begin with. I mean, out of all my big snakes, you know, the Burms, the Indians, the retics and stuff, they'll come right up to the glass at night for food. But the rock python will just sit there and wait, just motionless, just won't move a muscle until she sees my head turn. And then when she sees me turn, that's when she'll jump at the glass.
Because they're meant to eat, man. Like I'm sure you get a large enough one, it'll go after a person.
Oh yeah, it definitely. You can tell she's willing to give it a shot.
I'm sure there's rock pythons that have eaten people in Africa.
You hear rumors of small like children villages that go out and then they never get seen again, but they find a python with a big food bolus or something.
Yeah, I mean they've evolved to eat large items, so I wouldn't be surprised that they're a little smarter than some of the other species.
Yeah, well, especially since they evolved alongside humans, they recognize us compared to other species that aren't as familiar with us. We don't have a long history with them in comparison to the rocks.
Yeah, we're food once they get to that. Just like a retic. If a retic gets to a certain size, I mean, the smaller ones I'm sure would try, but they'll eat a person. I mean,
there was, I think the most, if I'm not mistaken, I think they said the most recent man-eater, the retic, was a 17-footer. Ate a small woman or something. So I mean, that's
someone. There's a few good photos. Like I wouldn't say good, but there's a number of photos of people inside the belly of a retic.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Or their feet sticking out when someone finds them. It's I mean, a lot of these big animals, they're not messing. We're just another mammal to them.
Exactly. Yeah, there was that. There was the one that was. I think it was in Borneo. They were tracking a sun bear, and they found a sun bear. They couldn't find the sun bear, but they found this big retic sitting in the water with a big food bolus. And a sun bear is equivalent to a Rottweiler as far as size. So they're a small bear, but they still get like the size of a medium large dog. So yeah, I was like, that's impressive. So
I'm not surprised though. I've heard you hear of good amounts of stories of retics taking primates and whatnot. They're pretty well evolved to
handle that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if they think they can get it, they're gonna try.
Yeah, all they do is just cough up the boots and the clothes afterwards, similar to like regurging hairballs and stuff.
Well, you got. I always think about it like this. It's always like large females at that point. You're not going to see a male retic that's at 15, 16 feet. So it's probably animals that are looking to reproduce, just like an anaconda is going to have a few of those large meals, and there's once that calorie surplus hits, they go into their cycle.
And I almost think more of like, we don't know the age of some of these animals, so they could be animals that are up in the upper range of age. And I always thought, because you see big retics on eggs, but you don't see some of these true like 20-foot, like these monsters. And I think that's true across a few different, most pythons, where I think at some point their size, they become more of a part of the, compared to a reproductive female will probably only eat for a duration period of time. Where I think a lot of those older, bigger animals kind of just make up the niche for those females that aren't taking a lot of food sources. So they become more a part of the ecosystem as far as like taking care of, a lot of the, prey items and stuff, comparison to the smaller reproductive animals. Because as far as I can think of, I've never seen too many like large kinghorn, even carpet pythons. Like you see a lot of the females, I'll see them pull off eggs. They're like 6, 7 foot. They're not like these big 10-foot, 11-foot ones found around human settlements or in cities and towns and stuff, eating a lot of people's cats and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, you gotta think it's like it's gonna take so long naturally to get to that size too, that it would make sense that it's not gonna be like a really fertile animal that's
Yeah.
reproducing as frequently.
So with Vin Russo, I don't know how much he kept track of his balls python stuff, but he probably had some of the best examples as far as long-lived ball pythons. When
Yes,
did he
I have
notice there
one
was
in the other room that's from he gave it to me. I was supposed to give it to someone, and then somehow this thing ended up as at my house. So I do have a few normal ball pythons. Very rare these days, actually.
right?
Um, that thing is over 20. There was a number of them that were over 30. Like
Yeah, I mean,
they had 9, 10 years on me. I was born in 99. These things were like 89, 90, 91, 92. It was just because they weren't big fat animals. They had a feeding season, and that was it. Like
right.
they'll reproduce, lean out, and then they get a window where they're going to get that influx of large meals, and then repeat the cycle.
Yeah, that was another one that, as far as like, why do you not see too many of these giant ball pythons you used to see back in the day, like these 6 foot big, ball pythons? Well, I noticed around like 5, 6 years ago, the whole ASF train hit, where people were primarily feeding and small rats. People were sticking the small rats or ASFs, which are equivalent in size to each other, but aren't very big prey items. But you'd see fat ball pythons, but you never saw very long ball pythons. People just equate weight to size, but you can have a 4 or 5,000 gram, 4.5 foot ball python compared to a 5,000 gram, 6 foot ball python.
Yeah,
And these things in the wild, they're eating Gambian pouch rats,
yeah,
giant native rats. And I have plenty of 1,500, 2,000 gram girls that will eat retired breeder male rats.
yeah. I mean that thing is old, and I don't feed it a lot. I mean, it'll get 8 meals a year,
Yep.
but when I feed it, that thing gets a massive
Yep.
lump in it. I just hit it with a big rat. Like I think I don't know why the ASFs became popular other than for scenting because they're pretty fatty. Like
Yeah.
they're not the healthiest prey item to be feeding.
Yeah. So I'm with you though. I think I remember hearing Vin Russo back in the day talking about he would feed his breeder females 10 to 12 meals a year. Yep.
Yeah,
I remember.
we counted. He that was when he would start teaching me. He would always show me. He's like, look at the amount of meals. So, like, they do not need this massive amount of prey items every year. It's not natural. Like
Yep.
these snakes aren't fat in the wild. You're
Yep.
not gonna like you those massive those photos of massive even ball pythons. Since we're talking about them, none of those animals are like obese fat storage on the side. They're pretty
Yeah.
lean and like just well filled out animals.
Yeah. I tell people they should be more oval shaped than round.
Yeah, they're
Because
not
people.
meant to look like a hot dog.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Other than maybe right before they reproduce, but outside of that, they shouldn't be looking like round balls the whole year round. And I've seen. I always tell people Angolan pythons are supposed to be oval shaped like this, and then ball pythons are like the reverse of that. That's the way they should look like. It's just we get that in our head, especially people who aren't really real herpers or real animal nuts. They go, oh well, it's in the wild, so it's suffering, so it must be underweight. So we
Yeah.
innately think that, so we want to feed it to get much bigger than that because we think in our heads, well, that's a wild animal. It must look like shit. So I need to feed it to look like what I believe it should look like, which isn't necessarily accurate or healthy for that matter.
Yeah, you'll see. You can find old wild animals, but it's like when people start to keep them like that, then you start getting, oh, why is it dead by 10 years old or
Yeah, have
whatnot? It's like,
reproductive problems like laser clutch of eggs or prolapses halfway through or doesn't even
yeah,
make it through a whole reproductive cycle because it ends up having a heart attack or a stroke or something like that. So
yeah, you start to see a lot of that because it's like everyone thinks it's kind of just a plug and play, same thing across the board.
Yeah.
Like, well, I can't keep chondros as hot as I would keep a ball python, or keep boas as warm as I would keep ball pythons.
Exactly.
You know, it's like you gotta kind of adjust a little bit, and like some species like can handle large amounts of food. Like a berm we see, especially in Florida, they'll get pretty thick.
Oh
But
yeah.
you start to move to retics, they're not seeing that kind of heavy body.
You shouldn't
stuff.
anyways, unless you're talking about the J stuff. Then you're talking like these overly flaccid snakes that look
Oh
like
man,
Yeah,
Jay
that's.
Brewers
I
are
mean,
impressive because they just keep getting fatter the
in
further
the
you
back
get down.
end. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
they
always
just.
like, I couldn't imagine the
Yeah,
shit
but
on one of those
from
things.
the bottom like 1/3 before their vent looks
Yeah.
like it looks like a fucking loaded diaper.
I mean,
Exactly.
there's a lot of snakes people will show, and it's like you could do liposuction on this thing without killing it. It's like the fat
Yeah.
reserves in there are
Oh yeah.
not meant to be that.
There was
Yeah, Jay's. Some of those do need liposuction. They need to
I
go
mean,
in. It'd be
even-
it'd be a big job.
I remember, I forget what place did it. They did it on hognose though. They cut open a number of hognose that were frozen off, and it was like the fat storages that they had. Because I mean, for the most part, hognose are not rodent eaters. They're
No,
not.
they're not.
They're
People
not
don't do.
taking in that kind of intake.
No,
So
they don't do portion. You gotta really do portion control, kind of like what you're saying with the green. Similar, you know, they're
yeah,
not.
I
They
think
feed way less frequently in the wild than we feed them in captivity.
yeah,
So,
like they have a window too. They're not feeding in winter,
Yes.
and they get a nice stint where prey items aren't going to be coming across in the same way. But then that time of year, it's kind of goes hand in hand with their season and their prey, and that abundance. That's really where they start to load up.
Yeah. It's just a different version of cycling,
yeah.
you know, colubrid cycling compared to equatorial species like boas and
Yeah.
pythons. You know,
You get a wet season and dry season, and then, but either way, it's like one of those seasons is not non-ideal to that species, where they're not going to be as active hunting, or they might be for whatever other reason. But my point kind of is, it's like if you look at anything, none of them are eating year round, really, that I can think of.
No,
Everything has its
definitely.
own seasonal cycle. So that's why I think, especially when you're trying to breed stuff, I mean, when you just want to keep them as pets and whatnot, it's a little different. But when you go to breeding, it's like you're going to want to go the more natural route and go on a cycle, because that's what they're more accustomed to. They've evolved that way.
Yeah, that's
So-
probably those like people projecting their feelings on this stuff. They're like, "Well, the animal looks better, fatter," or you know, I got to keep it on the schedule. Like that's the one. It's tough because like you know, I sell to a lot of like newer keepers and hobbyists because hognose snakes are a popular species of pet snake, and they want to have it on a feeding schedule. And I'm like, I try to tell these people, I'm like, you know, yeah, as a baby, juvenile, and even as a sub-adult, it's fine to feed them every 7 days. But there is a time where you should wane them off of that. And for your adult male hognose, actually, they're a little hard most of the time. Actually overfeeding it overweight because they kind of self-govern themselves. The female hognose, they seem to have as much, for obvious reasons, larger metabolism because they can achieve much larger sizes, and they naturally carry eggs, so they are always kind of like, if you're keeping it at high temps, their metabolic rate is just kind of always elevated, and they're pretty much receptive to wanting to eat all the time.
Right.
And then you have the same thing you see with leopard geckos too. Leopard geckos, you know, they store fat in their tails because they come from a region where there's sometimes not that much prey. And so they need to be able to, you know, weather those, you know, conditions, kind of like a camel. So they store fat in their tail. Ball pythons too, they're ones that, you know, they gorge in the wild when there's an absorbent amount of prey. And then there's periods when there isn't. And so some of those species, like, you know, they have this robust build. Same with like blood pythons. And so everybody's like, oh, they are supposed to look this way, so let's feed the shit out of them. And yeah, I'd say the average commonly kept reptile in captivity that is being maybe a little too well taken care of is now having the same effect as like a lot of the American population. You're eating a lot of really bad food all the time, and now you're a fat ass. And it's not good.
No,
When's obesity ever been healthy?
Oh yeah. Well, like you said though, that is a fine line when you got new customers, and you tell them it's like there's good to give them a fasted period, but the problem is sometimes when especially if you only got a few snakes, and you got to tell them don't feed it, for a few months or whatever it is, it tends to lead to that neglect stage where you don't see it, you don't mess with it, you kind of forget about it. So it's like this fine line. I always told people, I go, you can feed it like a python, for instance. If you want to feed it frequently or more frequently, give it real small meals, because if you give it a bunch of, big meals all the time, that's when I think you'll run into issues.
I feel like it's so rare though that once people are kind of in that mentality that they don't go with the largest thing possible, or at least larger than what they should.
Right.
It's a hard thing to kind of.
That's why you're lucky you deal with green pythons, where it's just you kind of get people that are more seasoned and understand it a little better.
You still get a lot of people that feed them. I mean, at least in ways that I mean, animals that are a lot larger than mine.
Right.
Not as abundant as it used to be. Like I can't remember the last time I saw a 3,000 grammer, but I know there's still some big ones here and there.
Yeah, right.
It's very mixed. Like with conjures, you're starting to get a lot of the ball python guys that are fed up and they're going to cross over, but they think it's like ball pythons and they're getting the rude awakening that it's not.
I did hear people with Boland's pythons that said, I'm going to treat it just like I did my ball pythons, as if well-known ball python keepers never kept ball pythons or Boland's like a ball python and had success. So I think some people, it's unfortunate, but you just learn the hard way, I guess. I mean, you can tell people day and night why your methods seem to make more sense, but until it clicks with them, they're going to default to what they've known. I mean, with ball pythons, for instance, that weekly feeding thing, that was a thing that was ingrained from you from the early 2000s, and then eventually goes like, well, why do I keep ball pythons differently than literally every other python? Because it's just that's what you were told from people who did it that way for years and years, rather than taking why don't I just treat them like I do every other python? And then, Lord and behold, you start running into less issues like that. Oh, my ball python won't eat mentality.
Yeah, well, it's like, I mean, it kind of comes back to you keep them how they've evolved over time. It's like they're not meant for that. They all work off a seasonal cycle. So you can't get away with feeding it like a monster, but I feel like it was like the pet store mentality. It's like everyone went to go to the local pet store to get a ball python, a boa, and they're like, oh, come in every Thursday to feed it. And they're like, this is how we keep it all. But you can't really, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I feel like the best way when you start to explain people is like you show them, it's like, well, if you keep them this way and you try breeding them, you're only going to get maybe like 2 out of 5 to go. But if you keep them the way they naturally would, you get 4 out of 5.
Right.
So it's like you kind of almost like a lot of the times I've noticed you almost got to like prove it with like evidence or whatnot. And then even then you still will get
you're going to get a lot of resistance, even with a lot of evidence.
Yeah.
People are like, well, I heard from somebody else, and I like their answer better, so I'm going to go with this stupid answer.
Yeah, I tell you what, some of the shit that sticks around in the reptile hobby, that one person had one experience and it just carried on with whatever species for decades and stuff.
Yeah, for like 20 years, same misconception, just repeated over and over again. Somebody heard it, so they repeat it, and then they repeat it.
All right, controversial time, and I was waiting to save this towards the end because I've been hearing a little bit more about this. And I was curious your input on this. So I don't want to out him because I don't want the green python community jumping on him for this, but I had a colubrid guy, or he breeds a lot of colubrids. He was talking about how he thinks it's weird, that chondro people were afraid to sex neonates because we know other colubrid guys who were sexing green python neonates as babies. Well, that led me to think the people who are the founders of the green python community prior to green pythons were big python keepers or animals that are more robust, like your berms,
Okay, yeah, I'm following
bull
you for sure.
pythons. And, they put some ass behind popping a lot of them. Well, then when they decided that, green pythons are available and jumped ship, were they the ones that said, oh, these things are impossible without breaking, messing
No,
up with their vertebrae? There's Vin. Well, I don't know, Vin. You want to say if Vin's done it before, but do you know of old timers, particularly like Vin being as diverse as he was and had so much experience with smaller species? I was curious what your input was on that.
So Vin said a lot all that stuff that I was keeping there, and then even stuff he was hatching out. We were sexing him at like 6 months, 6, 7 months. Like you didn't have to wait till 2 years old. But the problem was he'll do the method where he still does it like a boa, where you gently run and feel for the hemipene. They're not. I would say it's definitely true. You cannot pop one. If you do, you're gonna end up with a snake that has it looks like a geometry tool as an adult for a tail. Like you look like you're using a 90-degree angle or something.
Right.
And I mean, I will say I have a chondro that was hatched by a colubrid person, and they definitely probed it too soon or too rough, and it sexed the wrong gender because they went through the barrier.
Okay.
So I definitely like you. I'm sure you could probe a baby chondro, but the skill I feel like that it would require isn't something that most people would possess. I
Right.
wouldn't feel. I'm not saying like I could do it either. Like I would not feel comfortable probing a neonate. I'm sure you could, but the way you'd have to go about it would be a nightmare. That's so.
Well,
We
I was just curious because, uh, mainly because like I've done it with pygmy python. I mean, it doesn't get much smaller than a 4-gram pygmy python. Those things are, intimidatingly small. And the reason sometimes popping them at such a small size isn't so much because you harm them. It's because their hemipenes a lot of times are so small. It's easier to do it to them while they're a little bit bigger, so you can get them more, not mature, but just a larger size hemipene in comparison. And I've always was just more curious about the delicacy of their tails, mainly because I have seen pictures of them eating stuff like baby, like what is it, like macrae or little
I've seen that
monitors.
photo. I have that photo for sure.
And I'm like, man, that's such an impressive prey item. That compared for that young, it wasn't a hatchling, but you can tell it was still in that neonatal color stage still. So I was like, are they that delicate, or is it just that we big python keepers or more robust python keepers were doing it, and we were just being too rough on something a little smaller?
I think the difference lies in the fact that they have a prehensile tail versus stuff like the pygmy pythons, where they haven't evolved to have something so delicate that it's flipping around like a piece of hair in the wind. So I think the fact that it's that delicate at that small of a size, it makes it super easy for something to go wrong.
Here's my counter argument against that, though, and why I think it's so they would attack from a branch, so they're probably more inclined to hang closer to their vent and tail, depending on how they are. So I would think their tails would almost have to be, in some ways, stronger to be able to hang upside down from that ambush position to a degree. I would think, anyways. Especially if it's like a pretty, like the macrae who had some decent size to it. I just would figure that it would have to have some sort of strength to be able to withhold that prey item in a fighting prey item too. You're not talking just a limp dead item and a big prey item that's fighting back on top of it.
Well, a lot of the time, like even when you get them feeding, I mean, when they're set up even when you have a feeding neonate, they're not really draping the tail to the bottom and wiggling it down. A lot of the times they'll see it's even kind of pretty much parallel with their body on the branch that they're on, and they're just flailing it against even their own self. So it seems like, I mean, to get chondros feeding, to move back a little bit, a lot of the most common method is to annoy them, hit the prehensile, rub over the body. So I think the whole purpose, I wouldn't say it's to hold the prey item, but to get it in to the point where it touches them and they feel that movement, and then they just immediately turn around. Like one of the best ways I get a chondro to feed, rather than hitting the prehensile, I'll hit like 3 inches behind the neck. And as soon as they feel that, they turn around and wrap. I mean, that's with neonates that feed.
Okay.
But
I'm referring to more like them hanging with the prey item, and like they're using their tail to hang because they're prehensile. They're using it to hang and being strong enough to hold them and the prey item from a whatever distance they are.
Oh, okay. I now I
Not
get
so
what you're
much like
saying.
the
I
prey item
misunderstood.
latching onto it.
Yeah, I
Right, so-
misunderstood. I was thinking you were saying down and the items from there.
No.
A lot of the time, like I'll see when they go, if they get really excited and they'll hit a prey item, if they're not gripped prior to vent, a lot of the times they'll end up releasing and going to the floor and dropping down with it because they can't fully support.
Yeah, that makes
It
sense.
seems like they always need to have, I mean, it doesn't need to be much, but at least a little bit, and then that prehensile wrapped up can be enough, but it's always got to be something prior to the vent, at least for some actual strength and support.
Okay.
Not much, maybe only a few inches, but at least a bit as like an anchor.
Okay. Just something I was curious about that I literally just had a Kaluber guy talking to me about, and I'm crazy enough to where if I got babies, I'm going to say this publicly, I would probably try it, especially if I'm just going to keep a majority of them back, or at least do a group of them where I do half, I do that way, the other half I do what the traditional route was, just to see on average what was the vertebrae, if there was any vertebrae issues, and I got big powerlifting hands, so I'm sure I could have some issues.
Yeah, you're gonna have the nubs going, and it's gonna start getting rough.
I'd be really careful. You'd have to roll up.
I would get something.
One problem though. So many people try well, I worked with this species, so now I'm going to apply this to this species. And a lot of times it makes sense. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about, whether it be like, a crotalus, a viper, or if we talk about pythons or boas, I see a lot of actually similarities with care and culibrids, or ones that you can take from one another, ones you can extrapolate.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense. It's like, people overfeed hognose things. People overfeed a lot of different species. Yeah. And, there's a lot of, there's differences though, but I don't know about the whole popping. It's kind of like,
you know what I'll do if I make babies, I'll send Junior half the clutch, let him sex them. And then he can either keep them for a year and see how they turn out.
No,
I'd send them right back. I don't want to take care of any green trees. I got too much shit to take care of. If I was to pop them, I don't want to because I'm being told not to. It's a species where it's like I don't have any expertise.
Well, we won't tell anyone. I'll just send them to you.
We just told everybody here. I would do it like a Brazilian rainbow boa. My Brazilian rainbow boas, they had tails kind of like that, but they're not as sensitive. I know that. But I'd be very careful. And they're pretty easy to pop because I just roll my thumb up, and if I could see the ends of the hemipenes right there about to come out, I'm like, all right, it's a male. And if I could push up and I couldn't see that, I'm like, okay, it's a female. And it was always 100% like right. And I was just I would never get the hemipenes actually fully eject and come out. I would just see them like right at the top, and I would release.
Yeah. I always think it's easier to sex a lot of snakes right out of the egg or right when it's born because they have the least muscle control compared to once you wait a little while, then they have a lot more control of contracting and inverting their hemipenes.
Chondros are pretty small, though. How many grams are they when they hatch?
14, maybe?
8 or 9.
Man. Oh, they're that small? Okay.
How big?
8 or 9. Sometimes
grams?
12. Yeah.
That's the size of some of my baby fucking hognose.
Dude, yeah, they're eating probably the same size pinky that your hog is going to start on.
So it's like a worm?
They're worms. That's what I call them. I always get excited. I got little worms. I got colorful worms.
I mean, I see people with babies at shows that probably were like around like 20 grams, but I thought it was like, oh, that's the size they hatch, and it's only even if it hasn't really grown yet.
I've had people. I've ended up with someone sending me a chondro that wasn't much. I thought was like 2 months old, and it was almost a year.
Oh my
One of
God.
one of the big issues I think I was going to bring up regarding sexing is it's like people are so afraid to feed neonates, and they don't realize that they're meant to eat quite a lot at that young age because they're afraid of prolapses. So they end up with these really small animals, and then when it comes to sexing, you have a small animal that is even more risky. So that's why you get people saying like, "Oh, you got to wait till a year and a half, 2 years," and it's like I have 9 month olds that are the size of their 2 year old or a year and a half old. Like I did a test. I made mutts, so I'm guilty of that. But I crossed Arfak and Biak, and I was doing it with the Arus too. I just didn't get to see what the year mark was. I weighed them at like 11 months and 3 weeks, and that animal was the size 241 grams. So it was almost its adult size at the time. Like I could have sexed it at a much sooner time too. I think with the way people feed them, though, is my point being is they'll feed them so little that it puts off makes it even more risky to sex them at certain ages that say I would at like 6 or 7 months.
Sure.
Because they're like, oh well, the animal's 20 grams, and if I say mine is almost 100 at 6 or 7, there's a big difference. But then that goes back to how they're being kept.
Yeah, so you should really have like a size, like weight gram range that's like, okay, this is the range to sex at. All right, now Kenny, this is kind of more of a statement.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of a question. It's going to sound stupid as hell, but I swear, maybe about 20 years ago, I seen a video on Nat Geo or something of like a smaller green tree python. I'm just going to sound stupid as fuck, eating a moss.
Yeah, you're not. No, we've had there's so many conversations about that with chondro people.
I've seen it. I remember clearly seeing it. And then years later, did I actually see that? A little fucker snatching up a moss and eating it?
I don't
know what.
You guys should do that. It did happen.
Trees you can't get them to eat. Just put out a light with a white blanket outside. Get a big ton of moss and put them in there. And maybe...
Well, I noticed a lot of it, like, so for, like, going back to what Will said, like, they're not the most efficient hunters, which is probably a big part of why they don't get so large. They're meant for just ambush, and hence why they have the prehensile tail and a number of other attributes. But, like, those babies, they get to a point where, like, if a neonate's feeding, any movement it feels that hits its neck, whether it be my finger, it'd be a gecko, a pinky, I could anything, a fish. I guarantee I could get one to eat a fish. If you know what I mean, it's just the feeling of movement. So if a moth lands on one's neck and it's got a little, I guess, force behind it, that baby I could see easily turning around and just grabbing whatever. They're not going off as much of like scent and hunting an item down. At that point, it's really just movement.
Yeah. Carpets are like the same way too. There's something with the Morelia with touching that neck area that's a lot of times triggers a rap response at least.
That works on baby hognose sometimes. I call it the shoulder bump technique. It's kind of like basically the only thing I think that could really mimic what they're eating a lot in the wild as babies is little lizards. So like a little 6-line race runner or a skink kind of skittering, and they position themselves. Those babies will try to eat the little lizard eggs or the little lizards. Hognose aren't the best ambush predators, and they're not solely ambush predators only. And I think the weird way they kind of thrash when they go for prey, I think that kind of comes from their prey that they're probably ambushing the most, it seems like, is actually small lizards. So when a little lizard kind of skitters next to them, bumps into them, they kind of go like this, and they swing for it. Is that what green trees are eating mostly as babies, like lizards?
Amphibians and lizards, yeah.
Amphibians and lizards, okay.
Yeah, just like, I mean, even when I find hognose, we will go to the Jersey Pine Barrens. There's a ton of little fence lizards there. You get a few skink species. It's not really there. It's not rodent stuff. It's
Sure.
all items that it seems like they each have adapted to. I mean, a chondro though, it's going off something just touching it and or nipping its tail, and then the hog is kind of going off that. All right, I found something that kind of smells like what I want, so I'm gonna swing for the hills and try to grab something. Which is, I feel like, why we always see photos of them on tongs, snake hooks, the side of their bins.
Yeah, hands. If I go to Theo,
Yeah.
a lot of times they'll go for the biggest part. They'll like hit me in the thumb, even though the mouse is right there.
Oh yeah, I think that it's kind of they're not too far off with their prey items. It's just the complete different method of hunting.
Yeah.
But,
I do method pretty similar to you with the green python babies with the feed and freeze. I had to do that with the baby ring pythons where they would bite, but if you try to shut the tub, they'd immediately let go and then start spazzing. So you'd feed, let it grab, and you could tell it was contemplating, and then you freeze after it grabbed it. And once it would like think about it, it would like start turning it into a wrap. And then once it started wrapping, I would drop to the floor and scurry away. So it wouldn't see my big ass body.
I do, yeah. You melt to the floor. It's like the Wicked Witch of the West and having water poured on you. You just got to drop as low as you can and just slide out of view. I mean, I've gone as far as to tie T-shirts around my mouth so when I'm exhaling and I'm sitting there sweating, frustrated, and then finally I just sit there and I set up my phone and like I put on like a video or a podcast super low because I can't move. Once I start this, I'm gonna be stuck here until it's halfway done, and then I like try to perfectly slide the tub in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt that pain for the first time this year with those guys.
It'll stress you out for sure. I definitely end up I've cursed a few times when I'm sitting there, it's sweat off my eyebrow and I'm over the tub but I can't move.
Right. Well, usually because I breed my own rodents, it's just easier because I breed a lot of larger pythons that are big enough to typically eat like hopper mice at the smallest, and then obviously with the Antaresia and stuff, needing more pinkies and stuff. I noticed that like pinkies tend to be better if you do frozen than live compared to other animals, where if I can just plop a live in, most often not, it triggers them to eat. Every once in a while, I'll have a carpet that seems to be just terrified of a hopper mouse, so I got to offer like a dead one in the tub just to get it to more inclined to eat it.
I've done that. Like with the children, I don't think I've ever I've started them on, started them on frozen, but usually I'll just drop a pinky in there and they eat it. I've never really had problems feeding children. The carpets I've noticed can be like the chondros a little bit. They can get afraid of a prey item. They'll hide unless they're in that kind of opportunity where I know he'll start swinging at me when I'm attempting to feed. I'm like, oh, this thing's going to be a problem.
And sometimes it's the wrong prey item too. I had a whole back jungle carpet that just refused to eat live mice because she was big enough to eat like an adult-sized mouse. And you know, carpet jungles in particular are pretty notorious for preferring mice over rats in most cases. Well, I never occurred to ever try to feed this thing a rat because I would only ever try mice, and then I would try birds. Well, it would eat. It would eventually start eating frozen thawed mice, unscented, and then anytime I would offer an unscented or a regular scented mouse, it would refuse it. Well, I ain't gonna lie, this animal ended up being like half the size or less than the other yearlings that are the same age. And at some point, I threw in like a weanling rat, like a real small runty rat, and it took the rat like right away. I go, wow, all this whole year or over a year messing with it, and it would just, you know, granted I did starve it a little bit, so I'm sure a little bit was like, oh shit, I better eat this.
Well, it's like the same thing with me feeding the chondros. I try pinkies, but it's the wrong prey item.
Yeah.
Which is why I've never ever had one not eat a crested gecko.
Yeah.
I've had animals that I genuinely I hated how frustrating it was to try to get them feeding. But as soon as I would try everything for an hour, 2 hours, 5 minutes, few days. But as soon as I put a crested in 5 minutes, the thing's gone.
Yeah, that's
It's
what's
just the
happened.
wrong prey
Same with
item.
hognose. If you have a hognose that won't eat absolutely anything, won't take any type of scent, if you put in a small lizard in there, it eats it almost every single time. But I have to have a runt leopard gecko at the time.
Yeah, pygmy pythons are the same way. Wouldn't eat, I would assist feed it, and it would spit it up like 4 or 5 times before I just decided, fuck it, I'm going to feed it these baby morning geckos. And it took the morning geckos relatively quick.
Well, the crested gecko idea came from Vin using leopard geckos. I probably have the picture too. He took a picture of like 10 OS line babies, all in these yellow babies, all in these little cylinder cups. Just all of them were wrapped up on a leopard gecko.
Right.
And he was like, they wouldn't eat otherwise. But just like any of this stuff, like the hognose, whether it be a carpet, python, boa, we're offering what's ideal to us, hoping that we're gonna get them to just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah, there was one argument I've always had with like Ryan. Ryan would always be like, well, we shouldn't be trying to keep back these animals that are, not wanting to switch over to like pinkies. And I go, but that's millions of years of them eating lizards, and you think you can change it in one human generation?
Yeah, I remember there was someone with chondros a while back that if they weren't feeders, he was like, I'll just freeze them off because they're not meant to reproduce and keep going. And,
what the fuck, man? See, that's like shit that's been like we're just talking about, like misinformation that's passed on. That's what I tell. I tell people, hey, there's baby. As long as it's a healthy baby hognose, there isn't one that doesn't want to eat. It's just not identifying the prey that you're offering it as suitable prey, because that's not what they've evolved to eat.
Yeah, I would say, I wouldn't disagree with Ryan if he was say he was offering, you're offering cresteds or an amphibian, and it's like this animal still won't eat. Just doesn't want to try it. I'm like, all right, maybe this thing is fine. I can live without this one surviving.
No. But I do that with ball pythons. Like if I have a ball python that doesn't want to eat mice, I'm like, you're probably not meant to live if you're not wanting to eat like a mammal that you would naturally eat in the wild.
Yeah, once you get to that point and they're still funky, and then usually if they're like that, you're going to end up dealing with other issues on top of the feeding.
Exactly.
It's something that really is messed up. I think 99% of the time we're just offering, unnatural prey items.
Exactly. And you get the better, poops and stuff like that too. You don't get the runny diarrhea that sometimes pinkies can cause when you're eating, especially milk-based diet that the pinkies are on compared to a mammal or a reptile baby.
I wouldn't even think. I don't even go to think it's the milk. Because with chondros, a lot of people are making the argument. It's like, oh, they're lactose intolerant. I'm like, well, it's a damn snake. These technically it could eat something that's near rotten and has gangrene on a limb, and be fine. So why would lactose affect it? But that's where I always think you need that good flora in their gut to be able to digest a number of other things.
Yeah.
So that's why I always try to do the live. It's like in the wild, say we have a carpet or a chondro. They're going to eat a little lizard that's been eating insects that have all of these different organisms in its gut, and now that's obtained it.
This stuff's good. It's Nutribac. It's a probiotic designed for reptiles. I'll tell you what, man, it works.
I've never tried it, but I could see, say I was trying to go through the process with imports where I'm like flagella, panicure. I'm really kind of doing some invasive stuff on their gut. I could see that could be beneficial. But I feel like as long as you get a good basis, it's usually there. It's like Vin always told me, one rule was harden the animals off. So it would be get those 5 meals in a adequate time period so the body can actually utilize it rather than struggling.
Yeah.
Because you'll see people have baby balls or whatever it may be, and they barely feed the things and they try selling it. It's like, oh, I put 2 meals in it, and then it's this weak, limp animal, and it shits like crap, and you're like, what the hell?
Well, I've always thought with the ball pythons in particular is because I always thought, you get a more if you use a more mature prey item like a ball python can eat like an adult mouse or a small adult ASF that's a mature, more structured animal with good bone density compared to what most ball python people do is they want to start them off on rat pups, which is a fat, milky, because the way I've always looked at like the milk instances, most pythons don't evolve to ever eat typically neonate animals other than like rosy boas that are no nest raiders, or if you're talking about the big pythons, if they're eating baby ungulates like gazelle, antelope, even wildebeest and baby zebra and stuff, typically those are going to be animals that have milk in their gut. But generally speaking, I don't think most pythons evolved to be able to digest that that milk, in comparison to, animals that have evolved to be able to do that.
I feel
Even
like
us, I mean, we're placental mammals, and at some point we're supposed to not be able to digest milk. It's more like a switch in mammals where it shuts off after a certain stage of life, but we've evolved to the point where we don't. It seems to be very placid. We can drink milk, and some people can't handle it. Seems like a tolerance more than like you're born to do it.
Yeah, I feel like at least with like a prey item introduction, it's like you can get away with the milk being present there, but there's got to be other things like fur with keratin and all. You need calcium from some bone density, like say a baby an African rock eating a baby impala. That thing might be loaded up, or a gazelle, sorry, might be loaded up with milk from the mother, but it's got all this other stuff that animal's still going to be able to utilize.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Oh yeah, Kenny. One thing that Lisa asked, but because I know we actually already touched on that, and because it can be different sizes at different ages.
Yeah.
What size do you think is good to start probing or sexing green trees at? What weight?
I feel like if it can't eat like a hopper or something at least that size, it's probably still a little small. The problem with like I can't say age because my animals are usually like, but I would say
go by a size.
Yeah, like a hopper mouse, something where it's like at least like a little density on that animal where you're not really kind of going in with the smallest size probe and then also having to act like you're doing brain surgery. You want to have a little leeway. So I like if I'm probing them and we say I brought one to Vin and I tried it and then he tries it and we're like, we're not sure. I'll wait like an extra month or two to probe it just because it's more invasive and a little rough with the animal, because if it starts twisting and turning, I don't want it to be so small that it hurts itself, because I've had them do that. I had an Aru once that almost like snapped its back when I was doing an assist feeding, just trying to contort against me and get away. So that's why I want like a little extra size there. Like it's not as much age based because I could we've sexed them at like 7 months, but if I'm probing, it'll be closer to like 9 months.
What's the smallest baby green tree you've hatched?
I never weigh them. I will admit, like I find weighing things to be one of the dumbest things unless you really want to keep records.
I kind of agree. It's a waste of time. I do out of curiosity and sometimes to establish a baseline for information.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah, people go off. It's like, oh, what size should I feed can I breed a female? And I'm like, it's not.
No, I know. I've been doing that since I was like 15 years old, asking that question. At any point now, I just got to restrain myself from snapping, and I politely give them an answer.
It's I honestly one of the biggest reasons that like weight isn't recorded with me is because I don't take stuff out to play with it and stress it out. Like they don't like when I do it. They enjoy more when I get them settled in. So why am I going to take it out, shove it in a tub, weigh it for I don't really get any benefit out of it unless I'm trying to record something or I had an issue with the animal. So that's why like I've never weighed them, but if I had to guess, maybe like 4 or 5 grams, like a runt.
And it's insane. Because they usually hatch out. I just never knew they were that small. Because if I was to hatch out green trees and they crawled out at 8 grams or something, I'd be like, oh, I'm fucked. I'm like, this is wrong.
No,
I would
it
think,
throws
like,
you off the first time. You look at it, you're like, oh shit, man,
yeah,
this
you're going,
is.
shit, what did I do wrong?
Yeah,
This
you're like,
babies
oh
are about to
man.
die tomorrow.
Yeah,
They
you're
came
like,
out
did I
too
cook
early.
the
They're fucked.
incubation process? Did they hatch them a few weeks early?
Yeah, what's
No,
going on?
they're tiny, man, and like if you incubate them too warm and they come out even earlier, then you kind of deal with the problem of you got these babies with they haven't absorbed any of the yolk, so they're already cooking calories briefly after hatching.
Yeah.
So that's where that's where you'll see a lot of babies that like fail to thrive.
I think that's a good way too to dictate the size of the adults and stuff is when you do see the egg size and the neonate baby size, because I think that's what got a lot of green python people in trouble in the past was because the closest analysis they used were ball pythons, which is then they would go, oh, they have to be like this big in weight, but then when you compare like, a baby green python is half the size or less than a carpet python that can weigh anywhere from like 15 grams to 25 grams, depending on the species and subspecies. And then like ring pythons are the same way. I've noticed they kind of had that same stigma where people said, oh, they have to be huge. I can tell you my ring pythons are much bigger than my spotted pythons, or my Stimson's pythons. I mean, but their babies are pretty equivalent to like green python size.
I'd say from what I've learned today about green tree pythons, if you were to take a comparison, like let's say if you worked with ball pythons and you wanted to work with green trees, you would actually be better off if you were working with hognose snakes and moving to green trees. Actually, I see a lot more things in fucking common with them.
Yeah.
Their size, they're kind of like weird proclivities towards like, getting them to eat like a, prey that they're not really supposed to be eating as a baby, a small pinky mouse.
Yeah, if you can deal with that kind of frustration, it'll definitely help with when you want to put your fist through a wall trying to get them to eat pinkies and they want lizards. It would be beneficial to have. Yeah, I mean, I haven't hatched a ton of carpets, but like for example, I hatched the Bredeli, and they're like triple the size of a baby chondro.
Exactly.
They would eat. I could get one to eat one probably.
Right.
It's But the biggest fallacy was the chondros get big, so you don't expect these tiny babies. But meanwhile, most of the females in the wild laying eggs are in the 500-gram range.
Oh yeah.
They're like that thick. They're not, and it's also like you're not getting 20 egg clutches naturally.
Yeah.
You're getting 20 eggs because it's in captivity and you're nailing it with a small rat during season.
Yeah.
I mean, in the wild, I remember he had Waminas before they were gone, and I'm a little worse than him because I'm less patient, so mine will end up bigger than Vin's. Not like a lot bigger, but they end up bigger. And he had some that he kept pretty much the way they came in from the wild. Dude, they were tiny. They were like 450 grams. It laid 7 or 9 eggs. You weren't getting a massive clutch with this female brood. She can't even wrap up on the brood. She had this tiny little thing wrapped up like your hands together, and it wasn't a huge animal. But I think Daniel's study was awesome. I think it was like 1,000 animals or something.
Yeah, of all the species too.
Yeah, and 2 or whatever the small number was were about 1,000 grams. I forget what it was exactly.
Exactly. I think that is important information, and I think that can be extrapolated to a lot of stuff. And because I remember, I hear that this is back. I feel like we're picking on like either big snake people or ball python people, but back to retics, right?
All of them.
So
it's easy. Yeah,
like retics, you hear about the Sulawesi retics, and people go, they're so hard to breed. We're having trouble breeding them. But they try to get these animals because they hear, oh, they're man-eaters. They must be gigantic. So I'm going to feed this thing till it's this make-believe size I think it should be. When really it probably will breed at 10, 12 foot. It's just in your head. You think man-eaters, so I need to get it big enough to eat a small human.
I
You
think a
know.
lot of like the other good thing that like I forget who pointed out. It's like when we keep all these other species, and over time you've worked with other people, and we all pick up this info from each other. A ton of it is you can apply to other species. Like there's a lot of
Exactly.
stuff I've even learned with amphibians, out of all things, or fish, odd stuff. Vin has taught me a lot about reptiles through stuff he's learned through fish. Oddly enough, it's
Yeah,
like
I think Vin
it's
was the
cross
guy.
applicable.
I think Vin was the guy. I remember hearing back in the day, he would talk about like, everything's seasonal. Birds
Yeah,
were seasonal. Fish were seasonal. Mammals are seasonal. If you look at mammals, wolves breed once a year, but it's whenever there's an abundance of prey. It's the same compared to like a dog that can breed twice a year because it's, well, not just domesticated, but it constantly has food, doesn't
yeah.
have to worry about, fasting periods. But I remember Vin. Yeah, he was the first. I remember hearing back in the day talking about, just he did fish and birds, and they were all the same way. You
Yeah,
seasonally treat
PSU.
them.
That
Yep.
was like one of the first things he taught me is like because when you treat them naturally and they're on the seasonal cycle, all of them experience something different. With fish, it could be something with the tannins in the water that sends the signal to, oh, we got it, we're doing this. Um, like even with owls or other birds of prey, if they're not getting that surplus of calories towards breeding season, they have less eggs or no eggs. Like I remember they
Yeah.
made me write a paper on this in high school. But the owl that had a ton of rodents every season would have 4 eggs, but the one that was on the bare minimum would have one, two, or sometimes skip a season. It's
Yep.
like you kind of they it all correlate. You can correlate a lot of it to other animals.
Yeah, and I remember another one I heard from Vin was like he said not always, but he said if he had to get an adult animal, he liked having animals that were a little neglected, that haven't eaten in a while, so they look a little not shitty, but look like, oh, this animal's a little thin.
Yeah,
Because then
slow
he would
range.
get it
No,
in
we didn't
and
think.
he
Yeah.
would hammer it with food or hit it with food, and that would cause a seasonal cycle. That fasting period it had
Yes.
prior because they were getting neglected, which is what essentially is in the wild. And then
Yeah, they're
boom,
not.
you hammer them, and then you get a reproductive cycle.
People forget that they're in the wild and they're trying to survive. They're
Yeah,
not trying to have a good day and see if they get bored and like how they feel about eating. Like that thing is trying to just get by and not die.
right. Well, and then
So
in the like, especially when you're talking like import stuff that you could breed, a lot of that stuff was a lot of times stuck in limbo for sometimes weeks or months at a time. So, and then
yeah,
you don't know if that was their fasting period to begin with, so they probably weren't getting much food on top of it, and then being imported and taking months throughout that process. You got an animal that's looks withered or looks underweight, but if it's strong enough to make it in captivity, you pound that animal, you can reproduce that animal in some cases that first year.
yeah. Vin
Sometimes.
loves getting like if he's getting anything, he'd rather it be smaller than
Exactly.
larger. Like
Yeah.
he does. Because here's the problem. Say I give you a female and it's a big fat slob and I feed it every day. It's gonna take you 2 years to fix that snake.
Oh yeah.
More oftentimes than not. Like
Right.
we
Sometimes you
say all the
can't fix
time.
them.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of the times, like I know he's even like he's been offered stuff and it's like it's an awesome snake and it's like something that he would really normally want, but it's this big fat slob and he's like, why am I gonna deal with this thing sucking for 2 years
Yeah.
and then probably kicking the bucket? Because
Exactly.
here's the problem. Now it's confused. I'd rather go with an animal that thinks it's in feast or famine than something that's confused as all hell and doesn't know what time of year it is, when it's supposed to breed, when it's not going to get food, when it's going to get more food. You kind of are fighting. You're kind of kicking yourself in the leg and making things harder on yourself and your whole project.
Yeah.
It's just not bad. Fat animals shouldn't. It's not natural. Nothing, and even us, we would like our bodies react well to fasting periods.
Yep.
Like a lot of I forget there was a study from a guy I think in Japan or something. It was like when your body goes through a 3 day fast period, it starts to eat it can eat the unhealthy cells in our body, and but the point is like we're naturally meant to go through this cycle, and
Yep.
so are all other things. Nothing has a buffet line like we've now made it for the first time in history. Yeah, this has never happened before. The existence of everything in the world has typically been feast or famine. We used to like worry about winter. This is the first time ever you can feed something as much as you want and end up with morbid obesity and then still keep going.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
All right, Dave, you got anything?
Well, he muted himself.
You gonna gobble?
You got to unmute yourself.
The whole fucking time.
There you go.
A good amount of time. I had nothing to say.
I know you're listening. You're listening. You've been playing the role of a turkey very good. I know turkeys don't talk. I woke up at like a little before 5 a.m. today. It's almost midnight.
It is almost midnight. So what I was trying to say before was I went and I looked up that story about the 61-year-old ball python, and it looks like the zoo received the animal in 1961, and they thought it was about 3 years old when it came in. And in 2020, at the age of, well, actually just before it died, it had a clutch of eggs, 7 eggs, but it hadn't been with the male for 15 years, and then it died in 2021. So it bred, or it possibly parthoed at the age of 60 and then died at 61. But they also said that it was inconclusive because they were going to see whether or not she could have held on to sperm for 15 years, but they never finished.
Right. Didn't the eggs, so the eggs just died, right? They didn't end up they perished or something?
It didn't specify in what I read. I just read like a little clipping of it, but yeah, it's hard to say. I didn't see anything about them hatching.
Yeah. I feel like most partho litters or clutches are always they rarely go that well. You always end up with like a crappier clutch or animal. So it would make more sense if that clutch crashed that maybe it was a partho rather than it retaining sperm for that long.
Yeah, retaining sperm. Yeah, because like the record I know is like 7 years. That's over double.
Yeah, I've heard of like a year or two with a few things like different species popping up, but when it starts going beyond that, it's pretty rare. And then you get to the 15-year point, I'd be a little skeptical.
Right.
Yeah, the one rattlesnake, Warren was telling me about it. The one retained sperm for 7 years.
Yeah, I think ball pythons, the longest I've heard was like 4 years for ball pythons. But if you're keeping them hot, like I said, I think that's the problem with the pythons is if they're kept hot and kept warmed all the time, I think that's just diminishing that sperm from keeping it from being viable for that long.
Yeah, it's going to be an animal that would naturally be cooled down and kind of retain things with I don't know if I'd say a better half-life or whatnot, but so like when you start to cook through and now you're putting in strain, it's not going to last as long as it could.
Yeah. Lower temps keep the animal's metabolic rates lower, so even the storage stuff's going to be better. Like like a hognose snake or even a frog going through brumation, their heart rate's much slower than when they're at typical or adequate temps for digestion.
Even with chondros, the males, if you're cooking them and keeping them hot, his sperm's not going to be as efficient.
That's right, everybody. If you're overfeeding your shit, you're keeping your stuff too hot, stop it.
And dry.
Yeah,
and dry is like the most common thing I see.
Yeah,
sometimes the temps and everything.
Even like hognose snakes, man, like they go, even if you consider where parts of their environment is their habitat, sometimes the humidity is low, but the humidity is really never low in the soil, the substrate that they burrow down into. And then a lot of times they don't even go to the soil, but they'll go into grass clumps. And those grass clumps hold a lot of humidity.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that people don't take into account. Like I know with pythons, you always get well, why shouldn't I bring it down to 68 degrees? I'm like, well, a chondro or a number of these other species like a Bolin's where they're like, well, it's at 50 something. I'm like, well, it can go away to a burrow or find something to counteract that. Like there's always something in play to balance things out.
Yeah.
It's like even Uromastyx, people, you'll see they're like, oh, I should keep it dry because it's a desert species. And then this thing looks like it's barely holding on for dear life. But in the wild, they'll get moisture from the burrows they go in to get some hydration.
Yeah, no, very true.
That was the same with Woma pythons. Woma pythons, they have harder times adapting to human settlements because they're more adapted to burrows, and the burrows are what are real humid. I think they would get almost like 70, 80% humidity in those burrows. So, I mean, an animal that you associate with the desert, but still dealing with more moisture because they're in those humid environments down underground. So, yeah. And a funny one too is like with chondros, like their eggs incubate more similar to like blackheads and Woma pythons, where they seem to be more sensitive to moisture touching them compared to other species.
Kenny left because no,
there we go.
There he is. Oh, he's gone again.
He doesn't like something you said, William.
I would say, is this him just saying I'm done with this shit?
Oh, there we go.
I like this. I like these topics. It's good talk, but I am tired. I was about to do the same thing.
My phone is starting to wig out because I live near a train station, which tends to, for some reason, mess with everything.
Well, thanks for being on, Kenny. It's very cool stuff that you got going on the Green Tree Pythons. Thanks for all the information.
Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it. I've talked. Dave's brought it up a few times, and I got to meet Will at the Tinley last time for the first time, so it was fun to do.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'll just tips, man.
Tips. Thanks for Dave for the hookup.
Yeah,
hey,
Dave.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little secret, Kenny. I took William to the side, and I'm like,
he did too.
Guy. I think you guys will have this really good chemistry together. So really, that's all tonight was. I just wanted to get you in the same place and see how it was.
Right.
Yeah, I think when I met him, we were primarily talking about lifting at the time. We didn't really do much reptile talk.
Well, I didn't realize how big Kenny was when I saw him in person because I've only ever seen him from here up. Yeah, and I was like, Jesus Christ, he's way bigger in person.
Well, I'm like, I don't want to show my body. I'm scared. What if I could be too fat for a breeder, not a good male.
Yeah, we don't want to talk all this shit about having fat, overweight snakes and then us be big and overweight.
Yeah,
exactly. Then I'm a hypocrite.
Yeah, stand up. You're like got his huge stomach. By the way, stop overfeeding your shit. Yeah. He doesn't look good. You stand up, fucking massive belly hanging out. All right, see you later. Got McDonald's on the way.
Right.
That'd be pretty cool. Actually, I'm the heaviest I've ever been right now, which is still not that heavy.
You're still tiny, Junior. Don't worry.
I'm almost 180 pounds.
Really? Good for you, buddy.
Yeah, I'm like 177, 178.
That's awesome.
He's almost in man territory.
Yeah,
almost. No.
Probably will never make it there. I'm going to cut it at about 180, 185.
Right.
What's man territory to you, Will?
Oh, it was a joke, and I don't even remember if it was bodybuilders that came up with this or power lifters, but it was like, if you're not 200 pounds, you're not a real man.
Yeah, I would see it was I saw they were calling it victim weight. It's like if you're under 200, you fit the victim area.
I don't think that really. Here's the thing: not that it's a joke, but I know people that are like 205 and 230 pounds.
Yeah,
and they just look like a powdered donut.
Just
because you're fat doesn't make it.
No, it's just a joke. It's a joke that us heavier guys always use to justify our weight.
Yeah, I do it to my friend will call me fat, and I tell him he's a victim. It kind of.
Well, you know what I tell
evens
people,
out.
You know what I tell people is whenever they ask, well, why do you work out? And I just look at them with a straight face and says, the fear of being normal.
The fear of being normal.
That's usually it because it leaves them awkward because they're like, oh, is he calling me normal?
Well, if we're talking, we have people that are justifying their weight, then we got victim weight. And if I think Dave would be predator weight. So he's the predator because they're like, oh, there's victims. Where's the predator? That's the predator right there.
Oh, God. Specifically in the turkey outfit.
Yeah. Dave is predator weight. Dave, how much do you weigh?
I weigh about 182 pounds.
Holy shit.
That's what predator weight is, I guess.
Yeah, keeping it slim, guys. Keeping it tight.
Well, he's a hockey player. He has to keep it a little leaner than us.
All right.
Yeah, I just don't want to buy new clothes.
Fair enough. It's a good that becomes a problem.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Junior, you go ahead and wrap us up, or they're going to keep talking about their bodies.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Come back next time to find out what kind of victim weight, predator weight, and what kind of weight you should keep your animals. Thanks, Kenny, for all the cool input on green tree pythons and knowledge and everything. A lot of cool information learned today. Thanks, William. You're the man. Thanks, Dave, for doing a really good. We had Steven, he did a really good Donald Trump. We had Dave, he did a really good turkey by not talking the whole fucking time. Really cool. But I mean, that's fine. Sometimes Dave's just here just to hang out. So that's fine. Not just having fun. See you guys.
Have a great night, guys. Thank you.